subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Kanto Region Professor Oak, Hoenn Region Professor Birch, and Sinnoh as Professor Rowan have jointly certified this evolution method as a new evolution method and named it Mega Evolution, also known as Mega Evolution. At the same time, the form and ability of Gengar Mega Evolution are also attached below the message. After the news was released, all the trainers in the world went crazy because this is not only a way of evolution, but also this way of evolution will change the battle pattern and the choice of lineup. In particular, the props needed for the following evolution were seen by every trainer who paid attention to the news. After the news was released, the official website of Do & Company followed up and released a video of Mega Evolution. But this time the protagonist became Agron and Metagross. After the video was released, the emotions of all the trainers who saw the video were mobilized. If they could still remain calm about the Mega Evolution of Gengar and Agron, but Metagross as a quasi-god could also evolve again, this was really a sensation. In addition to those trainers, people from the Alliance and the company also saw this video. But in addition to their excitement, they also had jealousy towards the Doing Group. The people of the company and the Alliance finally knew why the Doing Group was collecting stones with all their strength. It turned out that they had known the method of Mega Evolution for a long time, so they took the lead and took away 99% of the evolution stones on the market. As for how the Devon Group knew the news, they soon found out about the friendship between Steven, the son of the Devon Group, and Maen. For a time, all the senior executives of the companies and the Alliance were cursing the old fox, Zvochi Mujin, who had known the news for a long time, but kept it a secret, and then secretly collected evolution stones to make a fortune. But they were jealous, so they could only grit their teeth and bear it. Now 99% of the evolution stones on the market have been taken away by the Devon Group, and with the announcement of the news, the evolution stones are even less likely to appear on the market. The rest will either be collected by people for sale, or they will dig new ones by themselves. But when it comes to the ability to dig stones, the Devon Group has something to say. At this time, many people thought that the road to discovering the Devon Group was no longer feasible, so they put their thoughts on Maen, who cooperated with the Devon Group. However, the more these people looked at the name, the more familiar it looked, and then they suddenly thought that the grandson of Kanto, Elite Agatha, seemed to be called this name, and then they confirmed the news. Please give me flowers, the people who were planning to attack. Maen immediately gave up the idea. They couldn't afford to offend him. If the Doing Group could be opened up with interests and connections, then Agatha Elite would be completely out of luck. After all, Agatha Elite would not talk to you about these things. If you touch Agatha's people, then Agatha would touch you and would not reason with you. Some people also thought of the Mega Evolution of Gengar in the video. As the discoverer, Maen discovered that Gengar could Mega Evolve. Would Agatha Elite have already mastered this evolution method? You have to know that Agatha's Gengar is her trump card Pokemon. If Gengar can really Mega Evolve, it is very likely that Agatha's Gengar can reach the champion level in a short time. The champion and the elite are 2 levels of power. However, everything that happened outside at this time had nothing to do with Maen. Maen and Cynthia had come to Celestic Town not far from MT Coronet, which is also Cynthia's hometown. Because Giratina only has 7 days to wake up, and there are still 5 days left, Maen put the thesis problem aside and planned to solve Giratina's problem first before writing the thesis. Anyway, as long as Maen's thesis is done, the researcher will basically be done. The reason for coming to Celestic Town is that it is not far from MT Coronet, and Cynthia said that there are many ancient books at home, which may be helpful to go to the Spear Pillar. TJ. Maen looked at Cynthia's villa in front of him and showed a strange expression on his face. 0123105225 Felu 12204116 and was also a little confused. Why did he suddenly come to Cynthia's house? Is the development of this matter a little wrong? Cynthia looked completely unconcerned. She took off her shoes at the door and then shouted to the door, "Grandma, I'm back, and there are guests." After Cynthia shouted, Footsteps came from the entrance, and then Professor Mustard Orchid, wearing a white coat, appeared in front of Maen, smiling and waving to Maen. Chapter 90 Arrival at MT Coronet. The old lady who greeted Maen was Professor Kazulan, Cynthia's grandmother, and also a famous Pokemon historian in the entire Pokemon world. Professor Kazulan smiled and said, "You must be Maen, right? I saw the video posted this morning. You are really young and promising." "Thank you, Professor Kazulan." Even though Maen was thick-skinned, he scratched his face embarrassedly. After all, he got this achievement by cheating. Cynthia also told Professor Kazulan the reason for Maen's arrival. When Professor Kazulan heard that Maen planned to go to MT Coronet for Giratina, he looked at Maen with more favorable eyes. After getting to know Professor Kazulan, an Luo led Maen into the study room in the room to serve as a minister. 887. If you ask where there are the most books about Sinnoh history, Professor Kazulan's study room may not be ranked first, but it is definitely in the top 3. As soon as Maen and Cynthia entered the study, they started to work and read the history of Sinnoh recorded above. Giratina, who had been following Maen, did not disturb Maen, but went to the yard with Gengar and other Pokemon and Cynthia's Pokemon to play together. Time went from morning to dusk, and Maen and Cynthia stretched their bodies and closed the books in their hands. After a day of reading, Massachusetts and Cynthia basically read all the books that recorded Arceus. "Maen, what did you gain from it?" Cynthia rubbed her eyes and asked Maen beside her. Maen also shook his head helplessly. Although Sinnoh has a long history, there are few records about Arceus, and they are very messy. Among them, the most common period about Arceus is when Sinnoh was called Shitsue in his previous life. Cynthia sighed after hearing what Maen said, and said, "I haven't gained much here. The last time Arceus appeared was 1,000 years ago." The book mentioned the city of Midna, and the records about this part are also vague. We only know that Arceus blocked the meteorite from falling from the sky, and then Arceus never appeared again. Maen looked thoughtful after hearing what Cynthia said. He had a little impression of the name Midna, and with the arrival of the meteorite, Maen suddenly thought that this might not be the city that tricked Arceus of the 5 stone tablets in the movie over time. If this is true, then Arceus should be sleeping now, and will wake up in a few years because of the fight between Dialga and Palkia, and then return to Medina to get back the life orb that was fused with the 5 stone tablets. Now that Ash and his group haven't come yet, it means that the past history has not changed. If we really have to wait until then to see Arceus, it will be too late. Thinking of this, Maen's face looked a little bad. Cynthia next to him saw Maen's face and gently patted Maen's shoulder. Maen turned around and saw Cynthia smiling and comforting. "Don't worry, Maen. No one will know what happened until the last step." Hearing Cynthia's words, Maen gradually calmed down, because animation is animation, and he is in reality. Maybe he can see Arceus when he reaches the top of Spear Pillar. Thinking of this, Maen stood up and called Gengar and other Pokemon playing in the yard, planning to set off to MT Coronet overnight. Maen had put all the things needed for camping in Gengar's stomach, so he didn't need to prepare anything and could go directly to MT Coronet. Cynthia also wanted to witness Maen's journey, so she took the Pokemon with her. But what made Maen feel strange was that when Professor Mustard Orchid saw them off, he looked at him a little strangely, as if it was similar to when Sabrina's father saw him off. Fortunately, Celestic Town is not far from MT Coronet. Maen and Cynthia arrived at Mount Unco before the sun set. The entire Sinnoh region is built around MT Coronet, so MT Coronet is also the center of the entire Sinnoh region. Maen and Cynthia chose a clearing in the forest to set up camp, planning to rest here first and change into thicker clothes because MT Coronet is a snowy mountain if it is only below the halfway point. The temperature is fine, but the higher you go, the lower the temperature will be, and it will be inconvenient to set up camp at that time. So Maen and Cynthia chose to rest at the mountainside first and then go to the top of the mountain overnight. Cynthia, who is also a trainer, is naturally not a young lady who stays at home, and she is already familiar with camping in the wild. However, Cynthia is a little worse than Maen in terms of cooking, because Maen, who grew up alone in a villa, has already practiced some skills and is responsible for the evening meal. Maen and Cynthia's Pokemon dinner was also prepared, and Maen also took the opportunity to carefully observe Cynthia's Pokemon while eating. The strongest one is her trump card Garchomp, which has reached the same level as Steven's Metagross. Elite level, the rest are also in the quasi-elite stage. Maen can only sigh that he is worthy of being the future champion. Cynthia and Steven's talents are too difficult for Maen to keep up with them if he is not cheating. Cynthia and Steven are both people with top resources and talents, so they can directly reach the champion level in the next few years. 2.6, however, the happiest thing during the whole dinner stage was Jirachi and Cynthia Spiritome. Jirachi was happy to meet more friends and see the beautiful scenery of MT Coronet that he had never seen before, while Spiritome was happy to eat Maen's special energy cube. You should know that Maen's special energy cube is the favorite flavor of the evil and ghost types. Even Marshadao was captured and turned into a bodyguard, not to mention a Spiritome. Spiritome fell directly after eating Maen's energy cube and became the first to become friends with Maen's Pokemon. After eating and drinking and resting, Maen and Cynthia packed up the tent and turned off the Courtney and put on thick clothes and officially headed to MT Coronet. Chapter 91, The Disappearance of Ma, and the area above the waist of MT Coronet has completely turned into a snowy mountain. The low temperature and the snow and wind make it very rare for people to come to the top of MT Coronet. Even Jirachi hid in the clothes on Maen's chest and did not choose to fly outside. With the leadership of Cynthia, a local staff member, and the elite-level Darkrai and Garchomp leading the way, no Pokemon dare to come and block the two's progress along the way. The Spear Pillar is located at the top of MT Coronet. When Maen arrived at the top of the mountain, he saw a scene of broken walls. Noticing Maen's puzzled eyes, Cynthia also sighed helplessly and said that the Spear Pillar is like this now. Maen showed a puzzled expression when he heard Cynthia's words, because whether it is a game or anime, the Spear Pillar is complete, not such a broken ruin. At this time, Maen suddenly remembered that the Spear Pillar found by Team Galactic in the anime was not at the top of the mountain, but in a hidden cave in the mountain. If it is really as shown in the anime, then this is not the real location of the Spear Pillar at all, but more like the ruins of a temple somewhere. 25. But the problem now is that even if Maen has watched the anime, it is impossible for him to find a location of the Spear Pillar directly. Even Team Galactic found it after a long period of exploration. And the most critical problem now is that Maen's target is not the Spear Pillar, but the Temple of Beginning above the Spear Pillar, because that is where Arceus is summoned. Jirachi looked at Maen's frowning brows, with a worried look in his eyes, and then white light began to emit from his body, and he activated the power of wishing again. Maen only felt the space around him change, and then found that he and Cynthia came to a huge dark space, and there were white light stairs under their feet. Seeing the surrounding scenery, Maen thought that this was the stairs leading to the Spear Pillar in the anime, and then looked at Jirachi in his arms with worry. Fortunately, Jirachi did not fall asleep this time, because this kind of transmission does not consume too much energy. Seeing that Maen's frown disappeared, Jirachi also showed a happy smile, and asked for Maen's praise in Maen's mind. Maen rubbed Jirachi's head, and then called Cynthia with a curious look on her face. "Let's go, Cynthia. We have come to the real Spear Pillar." "Spear Pillar? Maen, do you think this is the real Spear Pillar?" Cynthia showed a surprised expression on her face. After all, Sinnoh region has always believed that the ruins just now are the Spear Pillar. But Maen knew that the Spear Pillar was written vaguely in the records that Maen saw in Cynthia's study. It only said that the Spear Pillar was on the top of MT Coronet, so this misunderstanding was caused. Maen walked with Cynthia and explained what he knew. Cynthia couldn't help but take out the Pokemon Pokédex from her arms and wrote down the precious truth. The two came all the way to the final location of the Spear Pillar, a huge triangular altar. If you want to summon Dialga and Palkia, you need to prepare Adamant Orb, Lustrous Orb, and 3 Lake Pokemon to successfully summon. Maen didn't have these materials, and he didn't plan to summon 2 mythical beasts. All Maen wanted to do was to find clues to the Temple of Beginning. When Maen and Cynthia arrived at the altar, they separated and began to look for possible clues, completely unaware of the eyes that kept opening in the dark space around them. At this time, meteor showers began to streak across the night sky outside MT Coronet. Both the Pokémon of MT Coronet and the residents living under MT Coronet were attracted by this beautiful meteor shower. But Maen didn't know what was happening outside, and was still concentrating on finding clues to the Temple of Beginning. Jengar, Darkrai alert! At this time, Maen suddenly felt a prying gaze coming from behind him, and hurriedly turned around and looked behind him vigilantly. And in Maen's shadow, Jengar and Darkrai also emerged, protecting Maen's safety on the left and right. Cynthia, who was not far away, also heard Maen's voice and hurried over. Then she saw Maen looking at the darkness vigilantly. The owner who was spying on Maen in the darkness also came out. And I plussed the strange pattern around the eye and made up this Pokémon unknown. Seeing that it was unknown, Maen was not relieved, but became more vigilant. You should know that there are no unknown here in the animation, and the appearance of unknown will definitely bring about big things. The power of a single unknown is not very strong, but if there are more than two unknown together, there will be huge changes. In the Pokémon journey that Maen has seen, only 5 unknown can change the sun and moon of an entire city, and at the same time can copy a replica with the same strength as Cynthia's Pokémon. You should know that Cynthia was the champion at that time, and a few unknown can copy Pokémon with the same strength. Although he was defeated by Cynthia in the end, the ability of the unknown 523 totem can also be seen. In the movie The Emperor of the Crystal Tower, unknown can also create Phantom NTI, which shows how great the potential of this mysterious Pokémon is. Maen remembered that he had read about the research on unknown, and that this Pokémon could materialize people's expectations. But now, cold sweat kept flowing down Maen's head, because the unknown that Maen saw was not just one, but a sea of unknown. Maen. Cynthia shouted for Maen to run away quickly, because there were too many unknown here. Just as Maen was about to run away, he found that the sea of unknown around him was still flashing, and then Maen found that his body could not move. In Cynthia's eyes, Maen's body was shrouded in light, and then the whole person disappeared in the spear pillar. As Maen disappeared, all the unknown also dispersed, leaving Cynthia standing in the middle of the altar of the spear pillar at a loss. After Maen disappeared, Marshadao in Maen's shadow also poked its head out in confusion, because it could not sense the traces of Maen and its Pokémon. At the same time, the 3 Sinnoh gods Palkia, Dialga, and Giratina all looked towards the place where Maen disappeared. Chapter 92, Ancient Sinnoh Shitsue Region. Maen, wake up. Maen heard Jirachi's voice in a daze, and then felt a pair of small hands patting his face, and slowly opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw Jirachi's worried eyes, and then Maen reached out and touched Jirachi's head, saying that he was fine. Hearing Maen say this, Giratina also showed a relaxed expression on his face. Maen sat up, and he could feel the damp smell of the surrounding soil and the refreshing breeze. Looking around, Maen found that he was lying on a wetland, and there was a small piece of yellow grass on the king's land. There were also several small lakes around, and several water Pokémon were still playing in the lakes. Maen gradually recovered his spirit and recalled what happened in Spear Pillar. Maen only remembered that unknown was emitting light, and then he was teleported to this unknown place. Maen really couldn't tell where he was now based on the surrounding scenery, and then Maen also found that Jengar and the others were still around him, with the backpack behind him and the Pokémon on his waist. Ball was not missing. Only Marshadao was missing, probably because he was not teleported along. And Maen's top priority now was to find out where he was. Judging from the surrounding scenery, he should be in a wetland, and judging from the vegetation, it should be a wetland in the wild. Maen changed out of his heavy cotton clothes, put on light sportswear, and started moving. The fresh air around him also made Maen feel relaxed. But the Pokémon around him hid in fear when they saw Maen, and some Pokémon even attacked with rage. After putting another golem, Maen showed a thoughtful expression on his face because from the Pokemon that Maen had found so far, he had no way to determine the area he was in. And Maen also tried to use Pokédex, but found that the signal of Pokédex was gone, and he had no way to contact anyone he knew. But the Pokemon identification function could still be used. At this time, Maen heard a burst of Pokemon cried for help, and ran over in a hurry, and found a relatively dense bush to hide. When Maen looked carefully at the source of the sound, he showed a shocked expression on his face. There were two Pokemon fighting in front of him, and what shocked Maen was the identity of these two Pokemon. One of them was Yanmega. Although this Pokemon has the attributes of insect and flying, its personality is very violent. The reason is that Yanmega is a Pokemon from ancient times, which can be seen from the name. Like Relicanth, it is an extremely rare Pokemon, but there are 3 of them here. The other Pokemon fighting Yanmega shocked and even more, because the fighting party was actually a Lilligant and several Petalil. Lilligant and Petalil are not rare, but what shocked Maen was the appearance of Lilligant. Lilligant is supposed to be wearing a fluffy skirt, looking like a noble lady, but the fighting Lilligant shows 2 slender legs and wears a pair of yellow boots like normal. And this special form of Lilligant is also known by Maen. It is the Lilligant of Shichuan region. Maen instantly guessed that the place where he is now may be the predecessor of Sinnoh region, Shichuan region. Maen's mind was in a mess, because he didn't expect that he was sent to Shichuan region by Unknown. You know, Shichuan region is 1,000 years away from the timeline where Maen is. At this time, Maen thought of Unknown's shrew power, the greatest hope in human hearts. At that time, Maen's greatest hope was to find Arceus to try to help Jirachi escape from the fate of sleeping. This hope may have been sensed by Unknown, and then he used his ability to help Maen travel through time and space to Shichuan region. Lilligant's painful voice brought Maen back to his senses. Maen saw Lilligant standing in front of Petalil, enduring the pain, and still wanted to continue to protect his companions. Jengar, help her. Hearing Maen's command, Jengar, who had been unable to hold back for a long time, rushed out directly used Shadow Ball to repel 3 Yanmegas. Facing Jengar, who was stronger than them, Yanmega could only shout in hatred and fly away. Maen also came out of the bushes and slowly walked in front of Lilligant. Lilligant saw Maen coming and instinctively stood in front of Petalil, shouting not to let one get close. Maen could only freeze in place with the healing medicine in his hand, and did not dare to move forward for fear of stimulating Lilligant's emotions. Seeing the nervous Lilligant, Maen was also a little confused. He thought his smile was very friendly. Why was he so afraid of himself? Maen turned around and looked at Darkrai, who was emitting haze beside him, and Jengar, who was smiling strangely and seemed to understand something. In this case, we can only use the trump card. Go. Jirachi, it's decided to be you. Jirachi's cute face completely let Lilligant relax his vigilance. Later, under Jirachi's communication, Lilligant relaxed his vigilance and watched Maen nervously apply medicine to it. As the good treatment medicine gradually took effect, Lilligant's injuries were relieved. Petalil next to him was happy to see Lilligant recover and jumped around Maen. Lilligant looked at Maen with gratitude. After gaining Lilligant's favor, Maen also followed Jirachi to ask Lilligant about the situation nearby and whether there was any news of human activities. Soon Maen got the news he wanted. Lilligant told Maen that it had seen traces of human activities, but in the west, and there were few humans coming here. Maen also judged his current location based on what Lilligant said. Maen speculated that his current location should be the Cinnabar Plain, and the place with obvious traces of human activities should be the obsidian field closest to Jubilife Village. Chapter 93 Maen. Ye Xiong, I will be responsible for you. After getting the information he wanted, Maen said goodbye to Lilligant and Petalil. However, before Lilligant left, Maen still took a photo of Lilligant with Pokédex and then roughly measured some basic values, intending to go back and make Professor Oak envious. Maen didn't know why Unknown chose his expectations and sent him to the Shichuan region, but since he was here, he had to make the best of it. With this opportunity, Maen must go to see Arceus 1,000 years ago. Before going, he naturally couldn't do without the natives who were familiar with the geography of the region, that is, the residents of Jubilife Village. Shitsue region is the predecessor of Sinnoh region, which is basically composed of 5 major regions: Obsidian Field, Cinnabar Wetland, Ultramarine Coast, Pure White Frozen Soil, and MT Cornet Foothills. Among them, MT Cornet Foothills is located in the center of Shitsue region, and the remaining 4 regions are around the 4 directions of MT Cornet Foothills, wrapping MT Cornet Foothills in it. Maen's goal now is to cross the Cinnabar Wetlands to the Obsidian Fields, and then find the natives there, and learn from the temple how to meet Arceus. But problems also arise. Without the Pokédex map, Maen can't find the specific location by himself, and Maen 747 doesn't have a mobile Pokémon. If Zweilous evolves in a Hydreigon, it can fly, but now Maen has no means of transportation. If he only relies on his feet, Maen is worried that Giratina will turn into crystal and fall asleep when he arrives at Jubilife Village. As for Jengar, although it can float with Maen, it can't move for a long time, so it still needs a large Pokémon with good endurance. If the other party is still unwilling to find a Pokémon that can be used as a means of transportation, Maen can only use extraordinary means. At worst, he can release it when he arrives at Jubilife Village. Thinking of this, Maen began to recall the distribution of Pokémon in his previous life, Arceus. He had almost forgotten the specifics, but there were still a few Pokémon in Cinnabar Wetland that could be used as a means of transportation. After roughly establishing a few targets, Maen began to act, and the first stop of the action was some woods by the lake or in the wetlands. This is also the best area for Pokémon to obtain water and food, and it is also the area where Maen is most likely to find the target. In a forest in Cinnabar Wetland, accompanied by a huge roar growl, the Pokémon in the forest began to flee in all directions and began to move away from the source of the sound. The Pokémon that made the roar was a Pokémon on all fours. The upper body and limbs of this Pokémon were covered with thick gray-white fur, and the rest of the body was brown. The most eye-catching thing is the full moon pattern on the forehead of this Pokémon, which together with the 2 gray eyebrows on the forehead forms a moon-covering pattern. This Pokémon is also the totem of this forest, the unique Pokémon of the Shitsue region Moonbear. Moonbear is a Pokémon that can only evolve when the full moon appears in Ursaring of the Shitsue region. Its huge body and powerful strength make it the totem of this forest. Now the Moonbear is facing the attack of the Vespiquen tribe. The reason is naturally very simple. That is, the Moonbear has taken a fancy to the honey brewed by Vespiquen and Combi, which is the ultimate captivate for the Moonbear. The roar that was emitted before was also the roar of the Moonbear, and now the battle is over. The Moonbear licked the honey on the bear's paw, while the Combis fell to the ground in pain, and Vespiquen leaned against the tree trunk and looked at the ground sadly. Combi and the Moonbear who wasted the honey she had worked so hard to brew. Vespiquen's pitiful appearance, Combi's miserable state, and the bully-like attitude of the Moonbear next to him. It reminds people of Zhen Guanxi and Cui Lian. At this time, someone naturally has to be the Lu Tixia to do justice, and this person is naturally none other than our protagonist Maen. The Moonbear, who was eating honey, suddenly twitched his nose and stopped the action of his hands. The Moonbear smelled a refreshing smell, which was a new version of the ship it had never smelled before. Following the source of the fragrance, the Moonbear saw a human looking at it with a smile on his face and holding a box in his hand. The fragrance came from the crystal small cube in the Bushizi. The Moonbear could feel that the small cube not only tasted good, but also helped its own strength, so it was naturally impossible to give up. The Moonbear drooled at the corner of its mouth and slowly crawled towards the direction of the human. For its forest totem, everything here belongs to him, and Maen dared to break in here, so he would have to pay a price, and the price was those unknown small blocks. Yaya Bear, who thought that the human opposite would put down the food and run away when he saw him, found a strange situation. Why did the smile on the human's face become more obvious the closer he got to the human? At this time, Yaya Bear suddenly felt a chill in his whole body, and the hair on his body seemed to stand up, and he instinctively stopped. Yeah, Bear found that the human opposite seemed a little surprised after he stopped, but then the human actually walked towards him, and the smile on his face looked so evil. And why is there haze on this human? And why are there eyes in the haze? Yeah, Bear saw two black shadows rushing towards him from the haze, and he didn't want to recall everything that happened afterwards. Hey, Moon Bear, don't show that expression. I will be responsible for you, don't worry. Maen smiled, then hugged Moon Bear's head and stroked it vigorously. Woo-woo-woo. Moon Bear covered his face with his paws and made a sad sound. He instinctively wanted to resist Maen's touch, but thinking about the two Pokemon who pressed him to the ground and beat him up before, the resistance only turned into a woo-woo sound. Maen, it said that you must be responsible to the end. When you get to the village, you must let it go. Don't lie to it, and you must give it the food you promised before. Jirachi smiled and translated Moon Bear's words to Maen as a bear translator. But Maen always felt that the smile on Jirachi's face seemed to have a dark meaning. Chapter 94. Galar's Laban Professor Maen looked at Jirachi's somewhat evil smile and shook his head hurriedly to get rid of this idea. Jirachi couldn't be evil. As a trainer, Maen and Jengar were already very evil, and they needed a naive representative. Maen also sprayed healing smoke on the Moon Bear. Maen just told Jengar and others to just beat them into submission and not to cause too much injury. As a result, the thick-skinned Moon Bear was beaten for a full 10 minutes. There was no damage to the body, but the psychological trauma would probably take a long time to heal. In fact, as the totem of this forest, the Moon Bear is not weak and has reached the quasi-elite level. In terms of strength, it may be only one level lower than the Moon Bear King taken care of by the Jubilife village chief. But unfortunately, the Moon Bear met the bad guy Maen, who directly launched a shameless group fight and also formed a crushing in terms of strength. In the end, the Moon Bear could only join Maen with tears. Maen rode the soft body of Moon Bear out of the forest, holding a bottle of Vespiqan's last resort honey in his hand. Look, Moon Bear, doing more good things is good. Vespiqan gave me honey. Maen rubbed Moon Bear's head and said with a smile on his face. Moon Bear couldn't help rolling his eyes when he heard Maen's words. You human, do you think the bear is stupid? That was the bottom honey that Vespiqan took out because he was afraid of being beaten. After all, when you, a human, beat me, Vespiqan was hiding next to the tree and trembling the whole time. So this honey is not a prop of thanks at all. Maen naturally saw Moon Bear's rolling eyes, then smiled and dipped some honey with the energy cube, and then fed it to Moon Bear's mouth. Moon Bear, who finally ate the ability cube, couldn't help squinting his eyes. This was the most delicious thing he had ever eaten in his life, and he felt that the physical strength consumed by the beating had been restored a lot. For a moment, Moon Bear even thought that it would be better to follow Maen. There was nothing wrong with having such delicious food as a mount. However, Moon Bear quickly shook his head and shook off this idea, and then he was determined, but he couldn't hide his love for the energy block in his eyes. Maen hoped that Moon Bear would take him to the Obsidian Plains, and Moon, as a Pokemon who had lived here for a long time, would naturally know the Obsidian Plains. But he didn't live there because he didn't like the environment there. Moon Bear got Maen's command and started to move forward at full speed. Although the speed was not particularly fast, Moon Bear's advantage was endurance and broad back, so it wouldn't be too bumpy. Maen rode on Moon Bear's back, and Jirachi's laughter, who was lying on Maen's head, resounded throughout the wetland. Shitsue region, the ancient hermitage. A white-haired woman in a black dress looked towards Maen with an unknown look in her eyes, and then murmured to herself, People from the future, what kind of changes will you bring to this world? If Maen were here, he would definitely recognize that the woman in front of him was Wu Si, the most mysterious woman in the entire Arceus. As the woman's voice fell, a slender, pink Pokemon with a cloud under her body appeared behind her. This Pokemon is also the legendary Pokemon attachment cloud. It is said that its kindness will make new life sprout on the land of Shitsue, so it is called the God of Spring. If anyone does something that ruins life, the attachment cloud in the form of a spirit beast will appear from the sea of clouds and bring down a ruthless punishment. Attachment cloud, please. Wu Si's cold voice came. After hearing Wu Si's words, attachment cloud slowly disappeared from the spot. On the other side, Moon Bear also ran a long distance under the captivate of delicious food and finally arrived at the obsidian plain. The sun had not yet set outside, and it was still some time before night. Arriving at the obsidian plain proved that Maen should soon be able to find traces of human activities, so Maen also took Moon Bear to speed up his pace. On the way, Maen asked Jirachi if he still felt tired. Jirachi's answer to Maen was that there were about 4.5 days left, which proved that Maen needed to race against time. Just as Maen was riding Moon Bear, Maen suddenly heard the shouting of humans. Please give flowers. Maen did not hesitate when he heard the shouting and directly asked Moon Bear to rush in the direction of the sound. When he arrived at the place where the sound came from, Maen saw a slightly fat black man wearing a professor's uniform and a woolen hat running wildly, and behind him were several rage wurmples. Maen immediately recognized the person in front of him as Professor Laban in the game, so he ordered Moon Bear to stop Wurmple immediately. With a roar of Moon Bear, Wurmple, who was chasing Professor Laban, was frightened and hid in the bushes beside the road. Professor Laban, who escaped the pursuit, also sat down on the ground and breathed a sigh of relief, and then saw Maen riding Moon Bear in front of him. Professor Laban noticed the strange clothes on Maen and said with an excited expression, "Oh, young man, look at your dress. Are you also from other regions? Thank you for saving me. My name is Laban. What about you, young man?" "My name is Maen, and I am indeed a trainer from another region, but the distance may be farther." "Really? Where are you from?" Professor Laban stood up excitedly when he heard Maen's words, looking forward to Maen's answer. After all, in the game, Professor Laban in front of him is most likely from the Galar region, which is different from the region where other people in Jubilife Village come from. So he was so curious when he heard someone coming from a new region. "I'm from the Kanto region, which is a bit far away from your world, about 1,000 years away." Laban widened his eyes when he heard Maen's words, pointed at Maen, and stammered, "More than 1,000 years? Are you?" "Yes, I'm a trainer from the future. I came here by chance this time, hoping to meet the great Sinnoh. I hope Professor Laban can take me back to the village." Maen did not choose to hide his identity, because what he needed most now was time. So he had to quickly gain the trust of the village, so that he could meet the Arceus people faster. Chapter 95 Jubilife Village and the space-time rift. Jubilife Village is not far from where Maen and Professor Laban are. So Maen also got off the Moon Bear and planned to walk back to Jubilife Village with Professor Laban. On the other side, Professor Laban was surprised that Maen was a man from the future, but he quickly accepted this reality, because no matter the strange clothes on Maen or the equipment he used, they were obviously not things of this era. The most important thing is that Professor Laban believed that Sinnoh had the ability to let Maen travel to their era. "Maen, since you are a man from the future, do you know which Pokemon Sinnoh is? Is it Dialga worshipped by Team Kong or Palkia worshipped by Team Pearl?" Professor La asked Maen curiously. "Professor Laban, I'm sorry, I can't answer this question because the answer to the question may affect the future world." Maen was unwilling to tell Professor Laban the answer, because the answer to this question would directly affect the attitude of the Kong team and the Pearl team towards Maen. You know, these two organizations have been arguing for a long time over who is the Sinnoh Great Lord. At this time, Maen, a future man, came and said that the Sinnoh Great Lord you two said is wrong, and the real Sinnoh Great Lord is Arceus. Even if Maen said the correct answer, the Kong team and the Pearl team might not believe it, and it might offend the two organizations. You know, these two organizations are the managers of the Shitsue region, and the 10 Pokemon Kings are taken care of by them respectively. Maen wants to meet Arceus and naturally needs their help. So for Jirachi, Maen doesn't want to offend them on these trivial matters. Hearing Maen's words, Laban also showed an expression of sudden enlightenment on his face, because as a professor, he also understood the possible impact of this kind of time travel. It is very likely that a word that Maen accidentally said will affect people in the future. The two finally walked all the way to Jubilife Village. Jubilife Village is exactly like a village inhabited by ancient humans. The wooden bungalows, flat dirt roads, and the words on the surrounding wooden boards all made Maen feel the breath of history. Taking this opportunity, Maen also took photos of Jubilife Village. Along the way, the enthusiastic residents smiled and greeted Professor Laban. After all, Professor Laban's research on Pokemon has helped the villagers a lot. Although those residents did not know Maen, they also greeted him enthusiastically. Laban led Maen to the headquarters of Team Galactic, which is also a 3-story building in the center of the village. However, this Team Galactic is not the Team Galactic of the future Cyrus. The current Team Galactic leader Majimu is Professor Rowan's ancestor. However, a large number of people came to the Team Galactic headquarters at this time. As soon as Maen and Laban entered the hall, they saw the leader Majimu, the King Kong team, and the people of Team Pearl. The 3 parties were standing in the middle of the hall arguing, but was mainly the people of Team Kong and Team Pearl arguing. After all, there was a conflict between the 2 sides. Magamu was more of a mediator. Seeing Professor Laban come back, Magamu was relieved and then shouted loudly, "Everyone from Team Kong and Team Pearl, Professor Laban is back, we can ask him." Hearing Magamu's words, the people of Team Kong and Team Pearl also stopped arguing. After all, Professor Laban was the strongest person in Pokemon research in Shitsue region, and he usually provided a lot of help for the Pokemon problems they encountered. "Professor Laban, it's just right that you're back." According to the investigation of Team Galactic, Team Kong, and Team Pearl, a space-time crack appeared on the top of MT Coronet, and the spiritual contest conditions of the kings in various places seemed to be a little wrong. According to ancient records, with the appearance of space-time cracks, major events may occur. I wonder if Professor Laban has any clues about this matter. Magamu saw that everyone stopped arguing and asked Professor Laban, "Space-time rift." Professor Laban also showed a thoughtful expression when he heard Maga's words. He had been investigating Pokemon outside these 2 days, so he had not heard about the space-time rift. He did not expect that such a big thing would happen in these 2 days. When Maga and others were talking about the space-time rift, Maen also took this opportunity to look at the people present and began to meet the faces in the game. But what surprised Maen the most was that the protagonists of the game, Xiao Zhao and Ming Yao, were also in Team Galactic. It seemed that they were not from the game, but the natives here. What? People from the future. At this time, Team Galactic and the people of the Kong team and Pearl team shouted together, and then looked in the direction of Maen in shock. Obviously, Professor Laban had introduced Maen's identity. "Wait, then the space-time rift was caused by you, the guy who came here." Kong team leader Gangshur suddenly thought of something, and then walked quickly to Maen and said to Rage's Maen. Gangshur's words also focused the attention of everyone present on Maen, and the look in his eyes was not very friendly. "Hey, leader, I just came here today. Didn't you just say that the space-time crack has already appeared?" Maen said with a helpless expression on his face. Hearing Maen's words, everyone present was stunned. They were so concerned that they didn't expect this at all. "Sorry, I was anxious." "Sorry, but since you are a person from the future, you should know the reason for the space-time crack this time." Gangshur bowed his head and apologized to Maen, and then asked Maen seriously. Maen knew that the leader of the Kong team had a generous personality, so he naturally wouldn't blame him. And Maen did know that the mastermind behind the space-time crack was Wang Luo of the Ginkgo Chamber of Commerce. Whether it was Team Galactic, the Kong team, or the Pearl team, they were actually organizations that entered the Shitsue region from the outside, and they themselves were not the original Shunhe people of Shitsue. But Wang Luo was different. He was a true descendant of the Shunhe people, so he really knew the identity of the Sinnoh Great Venerable, and the appearance of the space-time crack this time was also planned by him, in order to find Arceus and control it, and then recreate the world. Chapter 96 Explain Your Purpose. It has to be said that Wang Luo's preparations were indeed sufficient. In order to achieve his goal, he chose to join forces with Giratina. First, Dialga and Palkia fought violently. The fight between the 2 Pokemon triggered a space-time rift to attract Arceus to appear, and then entered the space where Arceus was through the space-time rift. However, Maen felt that this idea was completely a fool's idea. If you really want to deal with Arceus, you must take advantage of it when it has no stone tablets. As long as Arceus has stone tablets, it will be invincible. In the theater version, Arceus can beat the other 3 gods, even if he is missing 5 stone tablets. You can see how strong Arceus is if contest condition is in its prime. But even if Maen knew the mastermind behind the space-time rift, he didn't intend to say it. When he entered the hall just now, he found Wang Luo leaning against the wall next to him, quietly listening to the quarrels of the crowd, as if the whole thing had nothing to do with him. Normal, however, when Maen was mentioned as a man from the future, 25 Maen clearly saw that Wang Luo's expression changed for a moment, and then quickly returned to its original state. After catching the change in Wang Luo's expression, Maen stopped observing him and looked around with a curious look. Now, as Gang Luo asked about the mastermind behind the space-time rift, Maen clearly felt the prying gaze again, and he knew without thinking that the owner of the gaze was Wang Luo. Sorry, I don't know who is behind the space-time rift. After all, my time is more than 1,000 years different from yours, and many documents recording ancient history have been lost. As Maen finished speaking, the prying eyes disappeared. Gang Luo and others couldn't help showing disappointment when they heard Maen's words, but they didn't blame Maen because they all knew that the gap between the ages was too big, and even if Maen didn't know, they could understand. Then what is the reason for you to come here, Maen, the man of the future? Majamu, the leader of Team Galactic, looked at Maen with a serious look and asked, I came here to see the great Sinnoh and treat the disease of my Pokemon partner. Maen called out Jirachi in his arms. Seeing Jirachi, everyone present was attracted by Jirachi's cute appearance, and then heard that what Maen did was to treat Jirachi, and looked at Maen with more appreciation. Treatment? Can't your future technology cure the disease of this Pokemon? And I think it seems to be very energetic. Although Maga didn't know Pokemon like Jirachi, he could still see that Jirachi's current contest condition was pretty good. After hearing Maga's words, Maen told everyone that Jirachi would fall asleep after 7 days of awakening, but he completely concealed Jirachi's ability to fulfill wishes. After hearing that Jirachi would fall asleep for 1,000 years after 7 days of awakening, the people present looked at Jirachi with pity, especially seeing the smile on Jirachi's face now. Some sensitive women couldn't help but shed tears. The leaders of the 3 organizations also fell silent after hearing Maen's words, and they were obviously hesitant about Maen's desire to meet Sinnoh. Maen, since you're a person of the future, do you know who Sinnoh is? At this time, the straightforward gangster looked at Maen and asked this question. After hearing Gangsher's words, Pearl's leader Zhu Bei also looked at Maen. Sorry, I can't say it. This may affect my future. You need to explore the answer yourself. Hearing Maen's words, Gangsher and Zhu Bei showed a tangled look on their faces. On the one hand, they wanted to know the true identity of Lord Sinnoh, but they were unwilling to force Maen to tell the answer, because they still had a good impression of Maen about Jirachi's matter. Especially when they heard that it might affect Maen's future, they were even more unwilling to delve into it. In the end, the 2 leaders could only sigh and give up the idea of continuing to ask. And Team Galactic's Magamu said, I'm sorry, Maen. Although you are a person of the future, we can't take you to see Lord Sinnoh. It's not that we don't want to help you, but meeting Lord Sinnoh is not a trivial matter, and we can't decide. Maen was not surprised to hear what Maga said, because in the game, if the protagonist wants to see Arceus, he must not only collect 18 stone tablets, but also pacify the king here and collect all Pokemon except the Phantom Pokemon. Arceus can only be seen after blowing the Tinsy flute. But reality is not a game. Maen does not have the Arceus brand mobile phone given by Arceus, and time does not allow Maen to collect stone tablets. The only feasible way left is to go to the temple to blow the Azure Flute and try to summon Arceus to appear 877. The current Azure Flute is not called this name, and its current name is the Divine Flute. When Maga heard that Maen wanted the Divine Flute, his face showed a serious expression, and then he firmly rejected Maen's request. Sorry, Maen, the Divine Flute is a legacy. Even if we are touched by your feelings for Pokemon, we cannot lend it to you. I can exchange things. In the future, We have made great breakthroughs in the research of Pokemon. At least I have information on most of the Pokemon in Shitsue region. I can exchange this. Maen took out the Pokemon Pokédex in his pocket and showed it to Magamu. Hearing Maen's words, everyone present showed excited expressions on their faces, especially Professor Laban, who almost couldn't help but rushed over, but still controlled his emotions. Magamu's face also showed a tangled expression. After all, the reason why they set up the investigation team and the guard team was to better investigate Pokemon and understand Pokemon, and they even paid the lives of many team members for this. If they have Maen's help, they can not only speed up their investigation, but also protect the lives of many team members. Chapter 97 Ye Xiong joins Wang Luo's planned Team Galactic is a team formed by people from various regions who have the same ideals. As the leader, Magamu aims to study the ecology of Shitsue region and pass on this achievement. But the investigation of Pokemon is not smooth sailing. The investigation in reality is not as easy as in the game. For example, the situation of Professor Laban being chased by Pokemon before is a trivial matter. Many team members even sacrifice their lives, and the information in Maen's hands can obviously greatly speed up their investigation progress and save the lives of many team members. The choice that Magamu is facing now is the ancient inheritance or the current achievements. In the end, Magamu gritted his teeth and said to Maen, I can give you the divine he flute, but the premise is that you must complete the challenge of the 10 Kings and join the investigation team of Team Galactic. In this way, you'll be a member of the team, and there is no problem in giving you the flute. Maen agreed to all of Magamu's requests, and then asked Magamu what the challenge of Wang Zhuang was. In civilized terms, the challenge of the 10 Kings requires Maen to use the treasure to calm the 10 Kings who are frantic because of the space-time rift. In simple terms, Maen needs to defeat the 10 Kings. The venue of the 10 Kings will be led by the captains of the Congo team and the Pearl team, and the challenge trial will start tomorrow. That is, Maen needs to defeat the 10 Kings within the remaining 4 days, and then take the flute to the temple on the top of MT Coronet. After the agreement, Maen changed into the Team Galactic uniform given by Maga, and then stuffed a few ancient Pokeballs into Maen, which is also the basic configuration of the investigation team. After that, the people of the 3 organizations left separately, and they still need to continue to investigate the cause of the space-time rift. At this time, Maen also came to the house temporarily assigned to him and called Yaya Bear. Okay, Moon Bear, I promise to let you go after I sent you to Jubilife Village. Now that the matter is done, I should let you go free. You should still remember the way home, right? Maen said as he took out the Pokeball that he had used to recapture Moonbear, and then tried to break it open in front of Moonbear. But to Maen's surprise, Moonbear stopped Maen's move with his paws, and then waved his paws to show that he was willing to follow Maen. Seeing Moonbear's shy expression when he said he was going to follow him, Maen couldn't help laughing. After rubbing the bear's head angrily, Maen hugged Moonbear's warm body and smiled, and asked if Moonbear was conquered by his personality charm. The result was Moonbear's contemptuous look, and then he whimpered twice. Under the translation of Jirachi, a full-time translator, Maen knew that the reason why Moonbear was willing to stay was because it was too greedy, coveting the energy cube in Maen's hand, especially after knowing that Maen came from the future. Moonbear was looking forward to how delicious the food in the future would be. What made Moonbear determined was the food that Jengar, who was also a glutton, occasionally took out from his stomach. Those foods were not only in styles that Yia had never seen before, but also tasted much better than the fruits that Moonbear ate. Maen did not refuse Moonbear's joining, because for Maen, although Ghost and Evil Pokemon were his favorites, he would not treat Moonbear differently for Pokemon that took the initiative to join. Like Lappers before, like Moonbear, Maen would regard them as family members. If he was willing to fight, he would fight. If he was not willing, he could act as a bed attendant. And if Maen could return to the modern era, when Maen could become a researcher, he could set up his own laboratory. Although it was not as large as the scale of the professor position, he could also approve a piece of land from the Alliance. At that time, Maen planned to build a home of his own like Professor Oak. At that time, The recovered Pokemon can be placed there, and if Jengar and other Pokemon have offspring, they can live there together. However, this is all after meeting Arceus. Maen vaguely feels that his time travel is not that simple this time, and there may be other hidden secrets behind it. At this time, somewhere in the Shitsue region, Wang Luo stood at a tiny space-time crack and walked in quickly. As soon as he entered the space-time crack, Wang Luo came to a platform, and the Pokemon flying on the platform was Giratina. Giratina, I need you to make Palkia and Dialga violent as soon as possible. Now the man from the future has come to Jubilife Village. I can't see through this person, but I am worried that he is likely to destroy our actions. You also want to defeat Arceus as soon as possible. Wang Luo looked at Giratina, soaring in the sky, and spoke slowly. Kristoff's arrival today made Wang Luo feel uneasy. He had a feeling that Maen's arrival was not that simple. In order to lure out Arceus, Wang Luo had already lured Xiao Zhao and Ming Yao from the investigation team to collect stone tablets and had already collected half of them. But he did not expect that Maen suddenly showed up and actually planned to meet Arceus in the form of the 10 Kings Challenge. Wang Luo knew that Maen, the man of the future, definitely knew the true identity of Sinnoh. If Maen met Arceus first, Wang Ling's plan would probably go wrong. In theory, Giratina would reply to Wang Luo every time he mentioned dealing with Arceus. But Wang Luo found that Giratina was staring at the direction of Jubilife Village. Giratina, are you listening again? Don't you want to deal with Arceus? Wang Luo shouted loudly. At this time, Giratina slowly came back to her senses and looked in Wang Luo's direction. She said unhappily that she understood and flew away. Wang Luo looked at Giratina's movements and expressions with some rage. Since the appearance of Maen, the man of the future, the whole thing has been messed up. Now even the contest condition of teammate Giratina is not right. But fortunately, Giratina still plans to act according to the plan. For Wang Luo, as long as he can control Arceus, Giratina is just a tool to be used. Giratina watched Wang Luo leave the broken world and then retracted her gaze. Before, she thought this partner was okay, but for some reason, since this morning, Giratina felt that this human was getting more and more unpleasant to the eye, and she always felt that there were people in Jubilife Village who were more attractive to her. Chapter 98, The Trial of the 10 Kings begins. The legend of the 10 Kings of the Washiyu is that an ancient hero brought 10 Pokemon to collect Arceus' stone tablets, found Arceus, and challenged him. Arceus was grateful for the courage of this hero and the 10 Pokemon and specially blessed them, which is also the legend of the 10 Kings of the Washiyu. A long time has passed, and only 5 of the 10 Kings that were originally inherited are left, namely the remaining Axe Mantis, Lilligant, Arcanine, Electrode, and Avalugg. The blessed Pokemon is not the original color of Pokemon, nor is it a different color, but is dazzling gold all over, and its body is larger than that of ordinary Pokemon, and its power is naturally particularly strong. In the current period of the Washiyu region, the 10 Kings are taken care of by the field manager, and the field manager is sent by 5 people from the Congo team and the Pearl team respectively. Although Maen said that he was going to face the challenge of the 10 Kings and appease the emotions of the 10 Kings, the only ones that needed special attention were the 5 Golden 5 Kings that had been passed down to the present. The emotions of the remaining new masters were not greatly affected by the rift of time and space. Maen chose the strange horned deer, one of the 10 Kings of the nearest obsidian plain, as his first stop. The manager who took care of the strange horned deer was Ami. The strange horned deer did not like fighting, and Ami was also moved by Maen's initiative to help Jirachi, so he directly taught Maen how to play the divine flute. The strange horned deer also heard about Maen's deed from Ami, so they specially sent a strange horned deer from the tribe to Maen to recapture as proof of Maen's successful challenge. After Maen used the ancient Pokeball to recapture the strange horned deer, it officially announced the start of Maen's challenge, and the progress was also completed by 1/10. At the moment when Maen recovered the strange horned deer, Wu Si, who was far away in the ancient hermitage, suddenly felt something in his heart, picked up the pen in his hand, and slowly wrote on 10 pieces of paper. Poem Chapter 21. When the power of the meteor comes, the future person who made a wish will come. When the future person passes the trial of the 10 kings and blows the flute of fate, the sun will appear. Time, kfaf, space, other worlds, darkness, and light will gather here. Writing here, Wuxi slowly stopped the pen in his hand. This poem is only missing the last sentence, but this sentence cannot be written yet. Need to wait until everything is gathered together before it can be written. Wuxi looked in the direction of Maen and murmured, "Future person, let people wait and see how far you can go." And Maen, who was written into the poem, didn't know that he had come to the second king's place in the obsidian plain at this time. This place is the Axe Mantis, one of the 5 kings that has been passed down to the present. Unlike the previous Deerhorn, this Pokemon blessed by Arceus is very sensitive to the cracks in time and space, so it has recently fallen into a violent contest condition. Regarding the arrival of Maen, the field manager G also has a completely different attitude from the previous Ami. G believes that the violent Axe Mantis is violent because it has obtained the power of Sinnoh, so he does not want Maen to pacify it. However, because Maen wanted to challenge the 10 kings, he led Maen into the residence of the Axe Mantis with an unhappy face. "Hey, your name is Maen. I don't care if you're a person from the future, but the strength of the king is definitely not as simple as you think. If you are afraid, just admit defeat as soon as possible." G, who was walking in front of Maen, came to the region where the Axe Mantis was and said with an unhappy face, "Thanks for the reminder, but I have to pacify it." Maen ignored Ju, and walked inside firmly. Ju, could only say, "Huh," when he saw Maen's look, and then followed Maen in. When he arrived under the big tree where the Axe Mantis was, Maen could see the golden Axe Mantis, and this Axe Mantis was waving its claws like a big axe at the stones of the ground frantically. Ju, couldn't help but show a worried look when he saw the Axe Mantis. Although he thought that the Axe Mantis had obtained the power of the great venerable Sinnoh, it was really obvious that the Axe Mantis was in a bad mood in the past 2 days. Even he, the field manager who usually took care of the Axe Mantis, couldn't get close to it. Maen stared at the Axe Mantis and quickly determined its strength elite level. Although Arceus' blessing has gained powerful strength and a long life, it also means that the talent is limited by the blessing, which is also the price that the blessing needs to pay. Most bug-type Pokemon are short-lived. Pokemon, and the reason why Mantis could live to this day, is naturally because it sacrificed its talent while gaining a long lifespan. Otherwise, it should have reached the champion level with the years it has lived. Maen had no fear in front of Mantis, and Darkrai, under the shadow, slowly rose and stood not far from Mantis. Kikui saw that Mantis's Darkrai also showed a shocked expression on his face, and he recognized that this was the phantom Pokemon Darkrai. And Mantis, who was venting his emotions, also noticed Mantis and Darkrai, who was full of fighting spirit. "Yeah!" Mantis rage roared, then gave up the gravel at hand and turned his body towards Darkrai. Mantis's slender legs bent slightly, and then a powerful force came out from its feet, directly cracking the ground under its feet, and then turned into a golden light and rushed towards Darkrai. Its quick attack, Darkrai Shadow Sneak, the 8th generation Darkrai, can learn it. Facing Mantis rushing over like spark normal, Darkrai's body quickly merged into the ground, turning into a thin shadow and disappearing on the spot. Having lost sight of Darkrai, the Axe Mantis crashed directly into the rock behind him, instantly raising a huge cloud of dust. The strong wind created by the swing of the 2 axes blew away the dust, and the Axe Mantis roared and shook off the gravel on its body, turning around again. Just as the Axe Mantis walked out, a thin shadow slowly came from the ground to the feet of the Axe Mantis, and Darkrai's figure reappeared behind the Axe Mantis. Chapter 99. Defeat the Axe Mantis King. Axe Mantis instinctively sensed the threat from behind and hurriedly tried to swing its axe claws to chop behind it, but it was still a step too slow. A strong energy wave came from behind, directly hitting the back of Axe Mantis, causing it to stagger a few steps. Darkrai quickly distanced himself from Axe Mantis and stood not far from it again. The wounds on the back of Axe Mantis slowly healed under its golden skin, which was also the effect of Arceus' blessing. Some minor injuries could be healed quickly for these kings. Maen looked at the wounds that Axe Mantis had recovered and showed a serious expression. Although his talent was limited, he had to say that Arceus' blessing was indeed powerful. Under the same strength, Axe Mantis could crush most Pokémon with a blessing. However, Axe Mantis' combat ability had weakened a lot after a long period of comfortable life, and now it was in a violent contest condition. Now Axe Mantis' battles were more based on instinct. Thinking of this, Maen had a plan in mind and planned to speed up the battle and not let the Axe Mantis have a chance to recover. Darkrai nasty plot. As soon as Maen finished speaking, haste surged on Darkrai's body, and his special attack ability was greatly improved. To deal with the Axe Mantis, Maen would not let Darkrai engage in close combat, and he planned to fight with it with his speed and long-range advantages. The Axe Mantis on the other side was also waving his two axes at this time, dancing an unknown and rhythmic dance, which was the enhanced skill sword dance. After the dance, the two axes of the Axe Mantis were wrapped in golden skin, and the luster was more dazzling. After the enhancement was completed, the Axe Mantis rushed towards Darkrai again, and at the same time, the two axes released light, crossed in a cross shape on the chest, and then chopped in the direction of Darkrai. Darkrai double team. Darkrai directly created 10 phantoms on the field in the face of X-Scissor, and at the same time rotated around the Axe Mantis, not only avoiding the attack of the Axe Mantis, but also making it impossible for the Axe Mantis to distinguish Darkrai's true body in a short time. The violent Axe Mantis swung its double axes frantically, but all it hit were the phantoms created by Darkrai, and there was no universal real body. In this situation, the Axe Mantis raised its head and roared its soaring in the sky, and then smashed the double axes hard on the ground, stirring up countless gravel. And these gravels began to slowly gather in the air, as if they were going to condense into several huge stones. Are you going to rock slide? It's a pity that it's too slow. Darkrai Psychic. Darkrai, who created phantoms and agility, immediately stopped double team, and then a cyanwood-colored light appeared in his eyes. After the special attack was strengthened by Nasty Plot, Darkrai's attack power was amazing. The huge mental power directly pushed the body of the Axe Mantis out in the air, interrupting the release of the skill of the Axe Mantis who was using Rock Slide. The body was smashed into the wall behind it uncontrollably. The body was smashed into the wall and produced a huge smoke. The shout of the Axe Mantis came from the smoke. Then a white laser cannon shuttled out of the smoke and attacked Darkrai. Its Hyper Beam, Darkrai Protect. The barrier condensed in front of Darkrai, and the Hyper Beam also hit the barrier fiercely. Darkrai's body couldn't help but retreat under this impact. However, Darkrai finally forcibly withstood the attack of Hyper Beam. When the smoke dissipated, the panting figure of the Axe Mantis appeared in front of the wall that had just been smashed. The Axe Mantis roared, as if it was still planning to launch an attack. But just as it was about to move its body, it frowned, and something like an electric arc appeared on its body. Are there any side effects of Hyper Beam? In that case, Darkrai, Dark Void. Darkrai gathered his hands and threw a Dark Void directly at the Axe Mantis. The dark ball hit the Axe Mantis, which could not move at all, and then a spherical black hole appeared, trapping the body of the Axe Mantis firmly in it. The Dark Void dissipated, leaving spherical traces around and under the feet of the Axe Mantis, and the body of the Axe Mantis also fell asleep on the ground. The last move to solve it, Dream Eater. With the use of Dream Eater, the physical strength of the Axe Mantis was drained, and it lost its ability to fight and lay on the ground. But even if it lost its ability to fight, the Axe Mantis did not faint, and its eyes were still red, and it was struggling to stand up and continue fighting. Under the protection of Darkrai, Maen walked in front of the Axe Mantis, took out the treasure prepared by Jubilife Village before, and threw it on the body of the Axe Mantis. After touching the Axe Mantis, Jinbao turned into a golden powder and covered the body of the axe mantis. The golden powder slowly merged into the body of the axe mantis, and the axe mantis's originally red and violent eyes slowly turned into a normal color, and the body of the struggle also relaxed, and the violent state also stopped. Noticing that the axe mantis stopped struggling, Maen also took out the prepared treatment spray and medicine with confidence and gently applied it on the body of the axe mantis. Soon, the wounds on the body of the axe mantis began to recover slowly. Although it could not continue to fight, it could already stand up gently. The manager, Ju Yi, who was watching the whole game, saw that the axe mantis had regained its sanity and hurried over to ask it if it was still feeling uncomfortable. The axe mantis shook its head to indicate that it was fine, and at the same time, it called out a few times to express its gratitude to Maen. Although it was not rational, it still kept the memory of what had just happened, so it knew that Maen was trying to help it regain its sanity. Maen also took this opportunity to tell the axe mantis about his 10 Kings trial, and the axe mantis nodded after hearing what Maen said, and then roared its soaring in the sky a few times. After the roar, Maen could clearly hear the sound of rustling coming from the woods beside him, as if something was approaching. Chapter 100: A Spy Among Bears. Maen looked at the woods that made the rustling sound and saw more than a dozen axe mantises coming out of the woods. The Forest King axe mantis roared softly, and then more than a dozen axe mantises came out and stood beside Maen. G understood what the Forest King axe mantis meant and told Maen that he could recapture this axe mantis as proof of the trial. Maen did not hesitate after hearing this, and directly reached out and took out the ancient Pokeball and placed it in front of the axe mantis. The axe mantis that walked out of the queue obviously knew that Maen had defeated the Forest King, so he did not refuse and directly stretched out the axe tip and gently pressed the button of the Pokeball. Accompanied by a red light, the body of the axe mantis was not collected in the Pokeball, and there was no resistance. Recapturing the 200 axe mantis means that Maen's challenges in the Obsidian Field have been completed, and then he can go to other regions. After saying goodbye to the Forest King splitting axe mantis, Maen returned to Jubilife Village to report his progress, and then headed for Cinnabar Wetland, where he had just crossed over. Majimu stood at the head of the village and watched Maen riding the moon bear away, and his heart was full of surprise. Majimu heard the whole story of Maen's battle with the splitting axe mantis from Ju. His original intention was to use the 10 Kings trial to make Maen give up, but he didn't expect Maen to actually defeat the splitting axe mantis, and the process was so easy. On the other hand, the news that Maen had passed the Forest King's splitting axe mantis also reached Wang Luo of the Ginkgo Chamber of Commerce. Wang Luo, who was lurking in the Ginkgo Chamber of Commerce, stayed in the Chamber of Commerce to obtain the maximum amount of information. But he didn't expect Maen to act so quickly. He had passed the Double King's trial in just 10 clubs. Wang Luo didn't think the 2 kings of Cinnabar Wetland could stop Maen's steps. He estimated that Kristoff would be able to complete half of the trial progress at the beginning of the trial, which made Wang Luo panic. After all, Wang Luo's original intention was to wake up the sleeping Arceus by letting Palkia and Dialga fight. Arceus would definitely take action to stop them from fighting. While the two sides were fighting, it appeared as a third party with Giratina. This plan was also Wang Luo's idea. But Maen speed is likely that Arceus will be awakened by Maen before Dialga and Palkia fight. At that time, Wang Luo will appear directly at the muzzle of the gun. Maybe Arceus will take the other 2 Pokemon to work together. Thinking of this, Wang Luo went to Reverse World again to find Giratina, signaling Giratina to speed up. On the other side, Maen also rushed to Cinnabar Wetland and came to the territory of Moon Bear. Moon Bear King is not a blessed Pokemon, so its strength is not as good as Axe Mantis, so Maen didn't care. With his own Moon Bear, Maen was not hindered and came to the territory of Moon Bear King and successfully met Moon Bear King. In addition to its larger body, Moon Bear King's strength has only reached the elite level, which is not a threat to Darkrai. However, just when Maen was preparing to fight, the Moon Bear in front of Maen stopped Maen, and then Maen saw his Moon Bear and the opposite Bear King began to communicate. Then Maen saw that the face of the Moon Bear King, who had been making a fuss, gradually calmed down and then began to communicate frequently with his own moon bear. After the communication, Maen saw that his own moon could crawl back with a proud expression on his face, and then called to Maen twice. Maen, Kuma said that it has negotiated with the Bear King. There's no need to fight. Just take out the energy cube. The proof of the trial is Kuma. The voice of the little translator, Giratina, also appeared in Maen's mind. Maen looked at the Moon Bear King, who pretended to be reserved speechlessly. He was also curious about who his own moon bear learned the habit of gluttony from. The root of the relationship was here. As the Bear King, he was afraid of fighting. Under the captivate of food, he actually gave up the battle. There is no Bear King. However, although Maen complained his heart, it was indeed the best thing for him not to fight. After all, it can save the physical strength of Pokemon and Maen's own time. After Maen handed the energy cube to the Moon Bear King, he took the moon bear away. However, as soon as he turned around and left, Maen clearly heard the satisfied voice of the Moon Bear King behind him and couldn't help but smile on his face. The manager who takes care of the moon bear is the oldest grandmother Shipu. As an old woman, she is very stubborn. She doesn't trust Team Kong and Team Galactic, and even Maen, the future man. In her opinion, it is too barbaric to use Pokeball to recover Pokemon. If Maen hadn't started the trial, she would never let Maen approach the Moon Bear's territory. But her stubborn personality also means that she values tradition. Since Maen has started the trial, she is naturally willing to stop him, but she also stopped after taking Maen out of the forest. Shipu's original intention was to embarrass Maen. After all, it would take a lot of energy for Maen to find the Moon Bear King in such a large forest, but she never expected that Maen had a bear trader and found the Bear King smoothly all the way. At this time, Shipu, who was waiting for Maen to come out, was also shocked to see Maen come out because it took less than half an hour for Maen to enter the forest and come out. 2.9. Have you defeated the Bear King? Shipu asked in surprise when she saw Maen come out. I didn't win because there was no battle at all, but the trial was successful and the Bear King stopped making trouble. Hearing Maen's words, Shipu's face was almost smoothed out with surprise, but she was relieved to hear that Maen did not fight the Bear King. Future man, take this. It's my apology gift to you. Shipu slowly took out a piece of parchment from his pocket and handed it to Maen. Maen took the parchment and saw something written on it in ancient characters. Although Maen didn't study ancient characters deeply, he could still recognize that what was written on it should be a prescription. Holding the prescription, Maen looked up at Shipu, the director in front of him, in confusion. Chapter 101. Darktail Fish seeing Maen's doubtful gaze. Shipu did not explain much and took out a bag of unknown seed from her pocket and gave it to Maen, then walked towards the territory of the Moon Bear King in the forest, intending to take care of the moon bear. Maen could only accept Shipu's present with doubts, put it in his backpack, and then rode the moon bear to continue rushing towards Lilligant's territory. The queen of the mountain rode Lilligant. The manager who took care of Lilligant here was Huixia, but when Maen rushed to the stage battlefield, he found that Huixia's face was a little strange. Manager Huixia, I'm here. Can I start to pacify Lilligant? That, Mr. Maen, Miss Skirt doesn't need to be pacified for the time being. Maen heard Huixia's words and looked at Huixia with doubts, waiting for her explanation. Ben explained what happened here. Because of the space-time rift, Lilligant was a little agitated under the influence of lightning, but Lilligant was originally a gentle grass-type Pokemon. Although he was agitated, he could still control his emotions. However, the day before yesterday, Lilligant's offspring was lost, so Lilligant's emotions got out of control, and he started to lose his temper, and the scale powder on his body began to shake out unconsciously. The scattered scale powder caused the visibility of the Moon Bear King not far away to be a little bad. Huang was not worried about a big mess. As a result, Lilligant's offspring returned here last night, and Lilligant's emotions stabilized, so there was no need to calm him down for the time being. When Maen heard Huixia's words, his face was a little strange. He always felt that the offspring of Lilligant seemed to be the Lilligant and Petalil that he saved. Maen told the experience of saving Lilligant yesterday. Huoxia also showed a surprised expression on his face after listening, and then led Maen into the stage battlefield together. After Maen entered the stage battlefield, he saw the golden sand queen Lilligant in the center, as well as the Lilligants and a group of Petalil surrounding it. Seeing Maen coming in, the Lilligants surrounding the Sand Queen suddenly showed a surprised expression, and then led the Petalil to Maen with laughter. Maen picked up a Petalil and caressed it, making the Petalil in Maen's arms laugh crisply. The Sand Queen on the other side saw this scene and knew that Maen had saved her offspring yesterday, so she expressed her gratitude to Maen. After hearing that Maen was taking the 10 Kings trial, she directly called out a Lilligant in the jade washing form from the forest. But this Lilligant was not a direct descendant of the Sand Queen, so it was no problem for Maen to recover it. After all, the reproduction ability of grass-type Pokemon is still very strong, and at the same time, it was also announced that Maen had passed the trial. Maen was in a good mood after passing 2 trials without fighting. After expressing his gratitude to the Mountain Road heroine, Mashi immediately went to the new region. Shichue Region Ginkgo Beach, Blue Coast. Maen chose to challenge the ghost-tailed black fish here first, and the manager here was called Amon. Amon was a tall man with dark skin and a monk-like appearance. In contrast to his appearance, Amon was gentle and timid in his heart, and seemed to be very afraid of ghost Pokemon. If you want to ask Maen how he knew, even if there was no game data from the previous life, Maen could tell by just looking at Amon's current appearance. After Ma and Jengar came out, Amon, who was leading the way, always looked at Jengar nervously, and his expression and eyes seemed a little scared. If Maen hadn't pulled Jengar hard, worried that Jengar would faint from Amon's shock and no one would lead the way, Jengar might have gone play a prank. You have to know that from the time he followed Maen until now, the only people that Jengar managed to scare were the 2 children in the Viridian Forest. None of the other people he met were afraid of ghost Pokemon. The positive ones were Steven, Dew, Cynthia, and Professor Oak, all of whom were either elites or champions, and they were not afraid of ghost Pokemon at all. And the villains that Maen met, such as the Pirates, Rocket Team, and Magma Team, were lucky enough not to catch Jengar, let alone be afraid of him. Jengar finally regained his self-esteem as a ghost Pokemon in Harmonious, and finally someone was afraid of him. This feeling made Jengar very satisfied. Maen was also a little speechless. Why would 10 people who were afraid of ghost Pokemon become the director who took care of ghost Pokemon? Fortunately, although Harmonious was afraid, he still insisted on bringing Maen to the territory of ghost-tail fish. Maen, who thought he would still face challenges, was dumbfounded again. You said that the ghost fish doesn't need to be pacified. Then how can I complete the trial? Well, because the ghost fish has a bad temper. Even after the space-time rift appears, the ghost fish is no different from before, so it doesn't need to be pacified. Armand was a little embarrassed when he said this, scratching his face and looking at Maen embarrassedly. Then what should I do? Why don't you make something that the ghost fish likes to eat? When I take care of the ghost fish will calm down as long as it eats delicious food. Armand felt even more embarrassed when he said this. After all, other trials are so grand, but here it's just to make food. If you want to say this, then I'm not sleepy. Maen had a strange expression on his face when he heard Armand's words. This guy probably doesn't know how I completed the trial for Moonbear before. You know, the energy cubes that Moonbear eat are just products that Maen bought in the mall. Although they taste good, they're not top-notch. However, if they're ghost and evil, then things will be interesting. If Mr. Maen feels troubled, I can take you to Dusclops, which seems to have a way to make ghost fish food. Although he was afraid of ghosts, Armand was determined to help Maen. But to Armand's surprise, Maen shook his head and refused his help, and then acted as if he was going to watch my performance next. Chapter 102, The Yue, Salted Fish King. Armand could only shut his mouth temporarily after seeing Maen's actions, and then quietly watched Maen's actions. Armand only saw Maen take out a box from his arms, and then took out a black cube from a box. Armand didn't recognize what this black cube was, but the pure black and dotted light spots on it made Armand feel that the cube was like a work of art. I saw Maen holding the black cube and coming to the beach, then holding the cube and stirring it in the water, and then putting the cube on the shore. After doing all this, Maen quickly ran to the side and then quietly looked at the direction of the sea. Maen's actions made Armin's head full of question marks. He wanted to speak several times, but held it back in his mouth. He could only wait with Maen at ease. But everything that happened next made Armand dumbfounded. I saw that the sea's surface, which was calm just now, suddenly began to surge, as if something was about to rush out from underwater normal. Then a scene that Armand will never forget appeared. I saw a huge black fish leaping out of the sea, then diving into the shore and swallowing the black cube on the ground. The black fish that flew out of the sea was too familiar to a Maen. It was the king of black fish. After that, Armand saw that the usually gloomy face of the phantom fish king showed a satisfied expression on his face, and then he lay on the shore like a salted fish. The satisfaction on his face could not be concealed at all. After the phantom fish king jumped out, there were other phantom fishes tumbling on the water, and some quillfish and 10,000 needlefish were also swimming on the water. However, these Pokemon have one characteristic. That is, they look at the direction of the Phantom Fish King on the ground with hungry eyes. If it weren't for the suppression of the Phantom Fish King, I'm afraid that the figure that just jumped out of the sea must have been one of them. At this time, Armand saw Maen step by step to the side of the Phantom Fish King, as if he wanted to observe the Phantom Fish King on the ground carefully. Seeing this scene, Armand shouted loudly to stop Maen, because although the Phantom Fish King now looks like a salted fish, this kind of Pokemon are very violent by nature. If Maen approaches rashly, he may be attacked by the Dark Fish King. Mr. Maen, Armand's words were blocked by the next scene. Armand only saw Maen squatting next to the Dark Fish King on the ground, and then stretched out his hand to pull the Dark Fish's body, and even turned it over in the process. But the Dark Fish King did not get angry at such an offensive action, but instead looked like he enjoyed it, and even cooperated with Maen in the turning action. Armand was madly complaining in his heart. What kind of Dark Fish King is this? Where is your usual temper? Even I, the field manager, have never hugged you like this. You scum fish. Why not change your name to Dark Fish King? That name is more suitable for you. After teasing the Dark Fish King, Maen took back the dark power in his hand, and then let Jengar help send the Darktail Fish King back to the sea. After all, the Darktail fish could stay more comfortably in the sea. Then Maen asked about the Darktail Fish King's trial, and the Darktail Fish King immediately agreed when he heard Maen's words. Thank you, Darktail Fish. This box of energy cubes is for you, Maen said, and took out all the energy cubes just now. However, at this time, the Darktail Fish King began to whimper a few times in the water, and Maen also stopped and looked at the Darktail Fish King's movements in confusion. Maen, the Darktail Fish King, said that since he wants the proof of the trial, can it follow you? Giratina slowly helped Maen translate the words of the Darktail Black Fish King. Maen looked at the Darktail Black Fish King in the water with a puzzled expression on his face, as if he was doubting whether he had heard it wrong. After several confirmations, Maen finally confirmed that the salted Fish King in front of him really wanted to follow Maen, and it was because the previous energy cubes were too delicious, making the Darktail Black Fish feel that the previous fish life was in vain. So in order to continue to eat these energy cubes, it planned to follow Maen. After hearing this, Maen felt that the Darktail Black Fish was too outrageous, even more outrageous than the Moon Bear King he met before. He didn't even want the throne for food. Maen, who was next to him, also knew what the Darktail Black Fish had done at this time, and hurriedly stood in front of the Darktail Black Fish King to stop him. No, Darktail Black Fish King, you can't leave, otherwise there will be no king in this sea area. The Darktail Black Fish King said that there are so many fish behind me, you can just pick one as the successor. 0123105 25 Felu 1 220 61 551. That won't work. Their strength is not enough to suppress this sea area. Didn't you see the Wanjin Fish School that we're watching covetously? You don't want your tribe to be bullied after you leave, do you? Maen knew that the director in front of him, Ammonius, was really anxious and even said such a BT like a certain country. Hearing this, the Darktail Black Fish showed a tangled look on his face. After all, as a king, it still needs to consider the people after it leaves. Seeing the hesitant look on the face of the dark-tailed black fish, a good king, Ammonius was relieved and finally persuaded the dark-tailed black fish king. But at this moment, the leader of the Wanjin fish who had been playing soy sauce on the sea next to him suddenly made a few gurgling sounds. Maen, that fat fish said it wants to go with you, so that their group will be as strong as the dark-tail fish group. So there's no need to worry about the dark-tail fish group being bullied. Giratina translated the words of the 10,000 needles fish on Maen's head, and the smile on his face could no longer be concealed. The naive Giratina did not understand the sinister intentions of this group of fish and only hoped that more Pokemon would join Maen, so that he could make more friends. On the other side, after seeing the excited expression on the face of the dark-tail fish king, Ammonius' originally dark skin instantly turned pale, as if he had lost his dream. Chapter 103, The Formation of the King's Appearance. Armand didn't know what he had been through. He only knew that as the field manager today, he felt that he had lost his dream for the future. Looking at the Pokeball in Maen's backpack, Armand instinctively wanted to stop it, but he didn't know where to start, because Maen didn't use any violence to recapture the Pokemon. It was these Pokemon who voluntarily threw themselves into Maen's arms. Well, I'll count them. The Ghost-tailed Black Fish King and its several queens, and the 10,000 Needle Fish and its several queens, a total of 10. The number is correct. Since the trial is completed, I'll take my leave. Thank you, Field Manager Armand. Maen counted the Pokeballs in his backpack, and then showed a self-proclaimed brilliant smile to express his gratitude to Armand. However, this smile was even more frightening to Armand than the ghost Pokemon. In Armand's eyes, this future man with a brilliant smile was simply a big villain. The most annoying thing is that Armand could not blame Maen, because Maen followed the rules from the beginning to the end, but it was this group of dark-tailed black fish that did not follow the fish ethics. In the end, Maen left Ginkgo Beach in Armand's sad tears. When leaving, Maen saw Armand's tears and sighed that although this man had dark skin, he was still quite sentimental. He was so reluctant to leave himself. However, before leaving Ginkgo Coast 617, Maen saw the leader of the Pearl team, Pearl Bay, and the manager Guana standing on the beach, with a Growlithe from the Washing Green region standing at their feet, as if waiting for Maen. Huh? What happened, Armand? Why do you look so sad? Manager Guana asked hurriedly when he saw the sad expression on Armand's face. Although the two managers did not belong to the same team, Guana had received a lot of help from the kind-hearted Armand, so when she saw Armand's sad look, she couldn't help but ask worriedly. However, Armand not only did not feel comforted by Guana's words, but became even more sad. Then he told Guana and Jubei everything that had just happened. Guana and Jubei looked at Maen with strange expressions on their faces after hearing this, and Guana even nervously hugged the Growlithe at her feet in her arms, and then looked at Maen nervously. Maen was also a little embarrassed under this kind of attack. After all, although the Phantom Owl was voluntary, it was also a fact that Maen took back these Pokemon. In order to avoid embarrassment, Maen hurriedly changed the subject and asked Jubei and Guana about their purpose. Wait, what do you mean that there is no new Island King of Growlithe now? Maen also showed a helpless expression on his face when he heard what Jubei and Guana said. Although Maen knew that the Island King of Arcanine in the game evolved from the Growlithe at Guana's feet in the plot, he did not expect that it would be the same in reality. The last Island King was swallowed by the sea, and the Growlithe next to me is now a candidate for the Island King, but it has not yet become the Island King. So the position of the Island King is now vacant. Then can I challenge the strongest Arcanine? Maen could only think of this way and asked immediately. No, those Arcanines are strong, but they are not the direct descendants of the Island King. They do not have the power blessed by the great Sinnoh, so defeating them does not count as completing the trial. Guana also showed an embarrassed expression on her face and said to Maen helplessly, "Then what should I do now? I can't bully this little Growlithe." Maen looked at the little fellow sticking out his tongue in front of him, with a helpless expression on his face. The strength of this future Island King is about the same as his own Lapras, so there's no need to fight. Based on this, we finally considered changing the method. We will take you to Blowing Fire Island, where you can choose to recover a Grolive or Kfaf, Arcanine, but the premise is that you must get their approval, and you cannot use violence and threats, etc. The number of recoveries is limited to 1, not more. Zhu Bei, as the leader of the Pearl team, finally came up with this method, but after saying this, Zhu Bei and others thought of Maen's method of recovering the ghost tail fish and immediately added a restriction on the spot, fearing that Maen would empty the Grolive on the island again. Maen also showed a disappointed expression on his face when he heard the last restriction, which made Zhu Bei and others sighed. By the way, Chief Zhu Bei, I have always wanted to ask you a question. That is, this isn't Grolive the direct descendant of the king? Why isn't it pure gold? Some of the kings I met before were also gold, while others were just ordinary colors. Maen asked with a curious look on his face. Zhu Bei smiled and explained after hearing Maen's words. Because many of the descendants of the first 10 kings have lost the qualification to inherit the blessing of the great Sinnoh. So those Pokemon are powerful, but have not inherited the complete blessing. And the king who turns his whole body into gold is called the king's form. And that form can be controlled autonomously. The function of that form is not only to show the king's appearance, but also to enhance his own strength. After hearing Zhu Bei's explanation, Maen finally understood why some of the kings were golden and some were not. At first, Maen thought it was the effect of the lightning of the space-time crack. Now, after Zhu Bei's explanation, Maen realized the difference between reality and some settings in the game. The space-time cracks are far less than in the game. The lightning of the space-time crack only slightly enhances the strength of these kings, but the disadvantage is that it will make them fall into frenzy. Compared with that little power, losing rationality is a greater side effect. After understanding these things, Maen is also preparing to go to Blowing Fire Island under the leadership of Zhu Bei and Guana. Maen, do you have a water Pokemon that can be ridden? Blowing Fire Island is located on an island in the sea. The dartail fish is not easy to ride. Zhu Bei yasket bizid mao. Yes, come out, Lapras. Lapras' figure appeared on the sea. Before Maen could speak, the two beauties, Zhu Bei and Guana, came directly to Lapras and observed him carefully. Chapter 104 Heatran. Zhu Bei and Guana curiously surrounded Lapras, staring at the Pokemon in front of them with stars in their eyes. Maen could understand their curiosity. After all, Lapras didn't have any Pokemon in Shitsue, and Lapras' appearance was a very beautiful Pokemon, and both Zhu Bei and Guana, two women, had a poor resistance to this kind of Pokemon normal. Zhu Bei's lineup was full of EV, which showed her love for this kind of cute Pokemon. Lapras did not refuse the approach of outsiders, but came over enthusiastically and let the two people touch him. As for a Maen next to him, he was ignored by Contestly. After all, beautiful women can have privileges to touch, but you, a man, forget it. When Lapras sang a beautiful song, the envy in Zhu Bei and Guana's eyes became more obvious. After all, who doesn't like an elf who can carry people, looks beautiful, and can sing? Zhu Bei and Guana curiously asked about the origin of Lapras, but when they found out that Lapras was a Pokemon from another region, they showed a disappointed expression on their faces. After all, they still needed to take care of the king and Sinnoh here, so they could only have no chance to meet Lapras. Shitsue Region Ultramarine Coast, Blowing Fire Island. This place is different from the sunny and breezy scenery of the Ultramarine Coast. It is an island located on the sea, and this island is also a huge volcano island. Blowing Fire Island is also the only volcano area in the entire Shitsue region. And this is also the place where Maen needs to complete the trial. Unlike the cool sea breeze blowing in other regions of the Ultramarine Coast, the air here is a bit unpleasant, with a sulfurous smell, and the wind blowing is also hot and humid. Fortunately, Maen's physical fitness is not bad and can adapt to the environment here. The Grolive in the Shitsue region is different from the ordinary Grolive. Its attribute has changed from fire type to fire and rock attribute. In Maen's opinion, the Grolive with 2 attributes is weaker than the one with 1 attribute. Although it has resistance to some attributes, it has 2 weaknesses that are 4 times stronger than water and ground. It is hard not to doubt that the Growlithe in Shitsue region later became a single attribute fire, not to adapt to the environment. But now these have nothing to do with Maen. Now Maen's most important goal is to recover a Growlithe as a proof. After arriving at Shuihu Island, Maen said to Guana beside him, "Guana, please tell me which Growlithe on this island is the most greedy. I just need to find this one." Guana also showed a helpless expression on her face when she heard Maen's words. She had no way to deal with Maen's way of using food to captivate. After all, the gap between ancient and modern food is still quite large. For example, taro cakes are delicious food in Shitsue, but they're still far worse than the energy blocks that Maen brought. Growlithe's recovery was not disturbed by any unexpected events. After all, under the captivation of delicious food, Growlithe quickly obeyed his desires and joined Maen's team obediently. Maen stroked Growlithe's fluffy fur and sighed that the touch was indeed not normal. Compared with normal Growlithe, the Shitsue region Growlithe is more vigilant towards people and is unwilling to get close to people. But Maen's Growlithe is an exception because Miss Guana introduced that this Growlithe is the most greedy little guy on the entire island, and he will immediately smile as long as someone feeds him. Maen also believed what Miss Guana said, because when Maen stroked Growlithe's belly, he could clearly feel the existence of a small belly. And unlike ordinary Growlithe, the eyes of the Shitsue region Growlithe are covered with gray hair, and even the fur on the neck and tail is more fluffy, which feels very warm and soft. Maen thinks it can be used as a small heater in winter. After recaptured Growlithe, Maen planned to say goodbye to Guana and leave Blowfire Island. But just as Maen was about to leave, he suddenly felt a gust of hot air blowing in his face and hurriedly looked in the direction of the air. A small turtle-like Pokemon stood in front of Maen. This Pokemon had orange-red eyes. Its head seemed to be covered with a metal mask. Its body was reddish-brown with brown and orange spots on it, and a structure similar to a metal anklet on its legs. There are 4 claws on each foot, distributed in a cross. Fantôme Pokemon. How is it possible? Heatran usually rests at the mouth of the volcano, and has never come here. Guana also showed an incredible expression on her face when she saw Heatran appear. Heatran likes to live in the lava of the volcano. The high temperature will melt its Orberg-like body, but Heatran still enjoys living here. Some Pokemon professors suspected that Nandolon intended to use this to melt the hardest shell. But now these are not things that Maen is considering because he has found that Heatran on the opposite side is in a very bad mood. His eyes are red, and his forelegs are constantly pounding the ground, obviously in a violent contest condition. Oh, is this violent? How can Heatran be violent? Jubei and Guana obviously noticed Heatran's abnormality and showed horrified expressions on their faces. "You two leave the next thing to me. You guys stay away for now." Darkrai and Jengar emerged from Maen's shadow, and Maen also released Zweilous, and then handed the backpack to Jubei beside him. After all, in addition to the Pokeball, Maen's backpack also contained Molter's Pokemon eggs, and he didn't want to be affected by the battle and damaged. Jubei handed Maen's backpack to Guana, and then stood beside Maen and released Espeon. Espeon's strength is also elite level. After all, as the leader of the Pearl team, Jubei's strength cannot be too weak. Maen, as the leader, I can't let you fight alone, and this matter is after all within the scope of our Pearl team's responsibility. Unfortunately, my other 2 Pokemon can't help at all, so the main attack can only rely on you. Jubei showed a firm look on her face. Maen didn't refuse after hearing this. He already knew that the 2 Pokemon left in Jubei were Flareon and Glaceon. Glaceon was a complete drag in this environment. As for Flareon, Maen had just observed that Heatran's body had been absorbing the surrounding flames. It was obviously the Flash Fire ability. If Flareon helps, it may become Heatran's charge Pokemon. Chapter 105 Wong Luo's plan and battle Heatran at this time. At Lake Verity in Shitsue region, the body of Mesprit, the god of emotions, slowly fell to the ground, and around it were 6 Pokemon that had beat up it. And the owner of these Pokemon was Wong Luo. Wong Luo held the Mesprit wings in his hand, and a smug smile appeared on his face. But then Wang Luo seemed to think of something, and a look of rage appeared on his face again. That damn future man. I have no choice but to take a risk. Wang Luo had been watching Maen in the dark, and when he heard that Maen had passed the 5 Kings challenge on the first day and was taking the 6 Kings challenge, he really couldn't sit still. Maen's speed was too fast, and it was very likely that the challenge would be completed tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. At that time, Maen would arrive at the residence of Zeus, the 7097 of Al. If Arceus woke up, Wang Luo felt that all his plans might be in vain. So Wang Luo could only go back and look through the family's recorded history, and successfully found a special clue in it. Legend has it that Red Chain can control one of Dialga in Palkia, and Wang Luo thinks that Giratina plus one of the other 2 gods is enough to have Red Chain. As long as Wang Luo has 2 of the 3 gods, he will be able to fight to the place where Arceus is sleeping. The materials for making the chain need to be in the hands of the 3-Lake Pokemon. Although Red Chain requires the 3-Lake Pokemon to make, Wang Luo has his own way. As long as he gets the materials, Wang Luo can make Red Chain himself to complete his plan. I guess that future person should have received my present. Wang Luo looked in the direction of Maen with a smug expression on his face. But I have to hurry to defeat the other 2 Pokemon. Giratina has already locked on the location of Palkia and the others. But speaking of Giratina, why does that guy's recent contest condition always feel wrong? Wang Luo said. Giratina showed a puzzled expression on her face. During this period, Giratina always occasionally developed and looked in strange directions. This situation happened after Maen appeared. However, Wang Luo did not intend to think too much. As long as he could see Arceus, Giratina was just a tool that could be used. Shichui region blowing Fire Island. Maen, who didn't know that Wang Luo was behind it, also received Wang Luo's present, which was the violent Heatran in front of him. Heatran roared and spit out a lot of flames in the direction of Maen, making Maen feel that the air around him seemed to be burning. Normal. The last time Arn felt this was when he faced Moltres, but the Moltres controlled by the Magma team was stronger, and the Heatran in front of him was only a mid-level elite on par with Darkrai. So Marn was confident that he could defeat Heatran in front of him. Gengar, Mega Evolution. Darkrai, Nasty Plot. Zweilous, use Dark Pulse to block Heatran's attack. Captain Pearl, please ask your Espion to use Light Screen to help Zweilous share the pressure. Under Marn's orderly command, Haste surged on Darkrai, and his special attack ability was greatly enhanced. On the other side, Gengar also underwent Mega Evolution, and his strength barely rose from the quasi-elite level to the intra-level elite. On the other side, facing the flames spewed by Heatran, Zweilous first released Dark Pulse to weaken most of the flames, and was then successfully blocked by Pearl's Espion with Light Screen. After Gengar Mega Evolution, Man's main attackers became Darkrai and Gengar Pokemon. The moment Mega Gengar appeared, the shadow under his feet began to extend wildly, and then closely connected with the opposite Heatran. This is also the Shadow Stepping ability of Mega Gengar. In the game, the Shadow Stepping ability can prevent Pokemon from changing and escaping, but in reality, it has more uses than these. This connection with the shadow of the opposite Pokemon is a good fighting environment for Gengar and Darkrai. Gengar, continuous Shadow Ball suppression. Gengar's body sneaked down along the shadow under his feet and almost instantly emerged from Heatran's shadow and directly used Shadow Ball towards Heatran. This sudden attack made Heatran unable to react and was directly hit by the Shadow Ball, slightly sideways. Sudden attack can certainly seize the initiative, but the power of Shadow Ball cannot be guaranteed. Although it hit Heatran, it is far from enough to make it lose its combat ability. However, Main's goal has been achieved. After hitting Heatran, Gengar continued to use Shadow Ball to attack Heatran's body. Under the continuous attack suppression, Heatran couldn't raise his head for a while, but the suppressed Heatran quickly opened his eyes of rage, roared, and raised his head directly against the Shadow Ball and spit up a column of flames in the direction of Gengar. Under the unexpected attack, Gengar was directly hit by Flamethrower, and his body flew backwards uncontrollably. And Heatran took this opportunity to chase Jengar again and spit out flames again. Jengar, protect. However, Jengar, who flew backwards, quickly turned around and created a light film in front of him in the air to block Heatran's attack. Although Jengar has reached the elite level, this strength of 2.7 enhanced by Mega Evolution is not real. So although Jengar blocked the attack, his figure is still a little embarrassed. However, looking at the dark energy flowing through Heatran, Maen knew that Jengar's Shadow Ball just now reduced Heatran's special defense a lot. Maen looked at Darkrai, who had been standing there from just now. At this time, the haze on Darkray's body was about to condense into liquid, which was the perfect embodiment of being able to hit. Maen had been asking Jengar to harass him from the beginning, just to give Darkrai time to prepare. Maen had asked Darkrai to use Nasty Plot and Calm Mind from the beginning, and now it was time to reap the rewards. Darkray's current special attack could not be underestimated. Chapter 106 Recovering Heatran, Jengar, and Zweilous were stalling, while Darkrai on the other side was using this opportunity to improve contest condition, which was also Maen's original plan. After all, there are no rules for this kind of outdoor battle, and any tactics could be used as long as they could win. Darkrai, Dark Void, Jengar, Disable. Mega Jengar quickly followed the shadow to Heatran. His eyes turned red and released ripples. Under the influence of Disable, Heatran's figure was sluggish for a moment, but he soon broke free from control and looked in the direction of Jengar. However, in such a sluggish moment, Darkrai had already released Dark Void and hit Heatran's body directly. As Dark Void was launched, Heatran's body was wrapped in a black hole. The black hole dissipated, and Heatran lay on the ground in pain. The enhanced Darkray's attack power was amazing, and only one Dark Void consumed most of Heatran's physical strength. But what Maen felt regretful about was that Heatran did not fall in a sleep contest condition. The injured Heatran became even more ferocious and roared its soaring in the sky. 25. As Heatran roared, Maen felt the surrounding lava and flames began to surge, as if they were about to burst out at any time. As Heatran's roar stopped, the lava on the ground began to gather madly in the direction of Heatran. Surrounded by the lava, Heatran was like a small sun. At the moment when the energy was gathered, the gathered lava exploded directly, and along with the flames, it turned into several lava twisters that swept towards Maen. Magma Storm, Heatran's exclusive skill. Several twisters blew madly with heat waves. Maen saw this doomsday scene and hurriedly stepped back. Then the dark power in his body turned into a line and wrapped around Darkray's back. Darkrai, Dark Void. As Maen's dark power was infused into Darkray's body, Darkrai directly released a huge Dark Void and blasted towards the Magma Storm in front of him. The moment Dark Void touched Magma Storm, a huge black hole appeared, accompanied by a huge suction force. Magma Storm blew towards the black hole as if attracted by normal, then twisted into a vortex and was completely absorbed by the black hole. After Dark Void dissipated, Magma Storm was also completely swallowed by the black hole. Heatran noticed that his Magma Storm was actually broken and showed a surprised expression on his face. At this time, Jengar suddenly appeared behind him. The Shadow Ball that had been in stockpile for a long time shot out and hit Heatran's back directly, knocking Heatran to the ground. After the Shadow Ball was launched, Mega Jengar also automatically released the Mega Evolution contest condition and stood aside panting. Maen was relieved to see Heatran fall to the ground. But before Maen could say anything, a dazzling red light began to appear on the body of Heatran on the ground. Self-destruct. Maen shouted loudly when he saw the red light appear. He really didn't expect that Heatran, who was furious, would even use self-destruct. As Maen shouted, Jengar, who was closest to Heatran, quickly escaped into the shadows. Zweilous and Darkrai stood in front of Maen, trying to help Maen block self-destruct's attack. At this time, white light appeared on the bodies of Maen and the other two Pokemon, and then the figures of the two spirit slaves disappeared from the spot. The explosion of self-destruct sounded instantly, resounding throughout the entire blowing fire island. In this magma area, self-destruct not only has the power bonus of skills, but the scattered magma is also a great threat. However, none of these hurt Maen, because Maen found that he and the Pokémon had come out of the explosion range, and it was the Pearl Shell leader who did this. Espion, at the critical moment, used teleport to lead Maen and others to escape the explosion range. Teleporting so many people and Pokémon at once also made Espion breathe heavily with fatigue, but the result was good. Everyone escaped the explosion range. Thank you, Chief Jubei. You're welcome, Mr. Maen. This is what I should do. Jubei also showed a relaxed smile on his face. As the explosion stopped, Maen walked towards Heatran again. Just halfway through, Gengar appeared again. Seeing that Maen was safe, he smiled happily and hugged Maen excitedly. Maen touched Gengar's chubby body to show that he was fine, and then continued to walk towards Heatran. At this time, huge pits appeared around Heatran after self-destruct, and cracked land was exposed around the pits, which was still full of magma. And Heatran's body was lying on the ground. His body was covered with wounds, and he was unconscious. Maen did not hesitate and threw the Pokeball towards Heatran. The Pokeball bounced after touching Heatran's body, and then a red light took Heatran into the ball 737. The recovered Heatran did not have the power of struggle and was directly recovered successfully. Jubei and Guana had no intention of stopping Maen throughout the process, because although Jubei helped, Heatran was indeed defeated by Maen head-on, so there is no problem for Maen to collect it. 012310525 Philo 1220711401. And the manager here, Guana, was a little happy in his heart because the Island King here is Arcanine after all, and Heatran is also a time bomb here. Now that the bomb has been recovered by Maen, Growlithe and Arcanine on the island can be much safer. Maen's idea is also very simple. Although Heatran is not a ghost or dark Pokémon, it is also a phantom Pokémon, which is completely sufficient as a combat power. If Heatran is unwilling to help Maen fight, Maen will not hesitate. After all, phantom Pokémon are very popular in the market. It is also a good choice to exchange it for resources like Zapdos. Because in Maen, no matter how rare the Pokémon is, if it is not in the same mind with him, it is meaningless to recover it. As for the buyer, there is no worry at all. For example, Maen's friend Steven is a good potential buyer. After all, Heatran is a steel Pokémon. Doing Group can also afford it. Chapter 107 Leisure Time, an unknown site after retaking Heatran. Maen only had 4 kings left to challenge, and he was not far from completing all the challenges. After returning to the Blue Coast with Maen, Jubei left in a hurry. Although Maen stopped the violent Heatran, Heatran's violent behavior was suspicious, and Jubei had to notify other people to investigate carefully. After saying goodbye to Jubei Guana, Maen rushed to the foot of MT Coronet. However, when Maen arrived, it was already dark, so Maen was not in a hurry to find the managers Mu-chun and Ingo here. Especially this Mu-chun is probably the most troublesome one among these managers. Maen still remembers that when he proposed the challenge in Jubilife Village and it was passed, it was Mu-chun who opposed it most strongly. When he heard that the content of the trial was to pacify the violent king, Mu-chun jumped up and down directly, saying that he didn't want the king to be pacified. He believed that the king's power became stronger after the violent behavior, which was a great thing, and there was no need to pacify him at all. He even said that even if Maen came, he would not help and would do his best to stop Maen's trial. If it weren't for the Congo team's captain, Gangshur, who spoke up, Mu-chun would probably keep nagging. Maen thought of Mu-chun's attitude at that time, and his face showed an irritable expression. He decided to wait until tomorrow, and if this guy still blocked him, Maen decided to use some extraordinary means. Maen is not a saint. He will forgive others generously when they jump on his face. After setting up the tent, Maen also began to prepare dinner. Pokémon need to eat basic food and energy blocks to supplement nutrition. This is also the breeder policy that Maen has always implemented. All Pokémon under rival are treated equally, except Gengar, the greedy one, who has an extra national food can. The previous trials also allowed Maen to accumulate a group of new partners, and it was also a good opportunity for all Pokemon to get to know each other. The reason why Maen wanted to recover these Pokemon in Shitsue was first for the trial, and secondly, because Maen wanted to see if he could bring these Pokemon to the modern era. When Maen recovered these Pokemon, he also asked whether they were willing to go to the modern era with Maen, and these Pokemon all agreed. From the moment they joined Maen, they regarded themselves as Maen's Pokemon, so they were naturally willing to follow Maen's footsteps. The reason why Maen wanted to bring these Pokemon to the modern era was that he might become a researcher after returning to the modern era, and researchers naturally have a topic. Maen could just report the Pokemon in Shitsue region as a topic. The research of Pokemon in Shitsue region is absolutely unique, and Maen also has the real Pokemon in Shitsue region, not those recorded data. At that time, Alliance will definitely approve a large piece of land and funds, and Maen can also assist the land and funds to build a home of his own. This home will also be Maen's real foothold in the Pokemon world. At that time, the Pokemon that don't like fighting will stay at home to rest. Anyway, Maen can afford it. Maen will carefully train the Pokemon that like fighting, and if there are a lot of them, Maen can also form a second team. As for the research of Pokemon, Maen believes that he doesn't need to speak up himself. Just tell Professor Oak about the matter of the washing Pokemon. Taimu Boju and other research madmen will definitely help Maen start research. In this way, Maen can not only get the Alliance's funds for free, but also get Professor Oak and other research talents for free. Well, thinking of this, Maen felt that he was indeed a bad guy, and he was the kind of person who was hung on the street lamp before. Releasing all the Pokemon also made the open space in front of Maen lively. The gluttons such as Moon Bear, Growlithe, and Jengar gathered together to exchange eating experiences. Lilligant sat on Lapras's back and sang together. Splitter Mantis and Zweilous exchanged experiences on how to become stronger. The Deerhorn was lying next to Lapras and Lilligant, listening to the songs and resting comfortably. The Darktail and the Tensei were quietly waiting for Maen to feed them in the lake. The busiest Pokemon was Jirachi, and the happiest one with so many new partners. It kept flying in the air, sometimes squeezing in beside Jengar, and sometimes joining Lapras and others to sing together with a smile on its face. Maen was preparing food, but there was no need to make energy blocks, as the stock left before was enough. Darkrai quietly emerged from Maen's shadow, and then helped Maen make food. 0-1-2-3-1-0-5-2-5 Philo 1-2-2-0-7-1-5-1-1. Darkrai, are you used to this kind of life? But I always need you to help me fight. I'm really sorry. Maen was talking to Darkrai beside him while making food. Among these Pokemon, Maen is most assured of Darkrai, because Darkrai is not only the strongest, but also has a more stable personality. But Maen is also most worried about Darkrai, because he was betrayed and imprisoned by humans. Maen does not want Darkrai to be hurt. But Darkrai has been fighting frequently since joining Maen, so Maen is also a little worried about whether Darkrai will feel uncomfortable. Darkrai looked at the happy smiles on the faces of the Pokemon and thought of the bond with Maen, and his ice blue eyes also showed a relaxed feeling, and then said, "Don't apologize, Maen. I like my current life very much, and I also like fighting." Darkrai is not good at communication, but Maen can still hear the sincere emotions from its tone, and Maen also showed a relieved expression on his face after listening. "Now that's the case, I'm relieved. I'll continue to support you in the future, Darkrai." Maen rang the bell and announced to the Pokemon below that dinner was ready. As the bell rang, all the Pokemon on Maen's side rushed to Maen and happily surrounded him. Lilligant even made a wreath and gently put it on Maen's head to express his gratitude. Seeing Maen wearing the wreath, the Pokemon present laughed happily again. This harmonious and warm scene was also silently seen by a figure hiding behind a tree in the woods. Chapter 108 Rotom Pokédex. As night fell, the bright moon also hung and soaring in the sky. Standing in the open space at the foot of Mt. Coronet, Maen could clearly see the bright stars and the cool moonlight on soaring in the sky. However, Maen had no intention of appreciating the moon, because the continuous challenge of the Six Kings today had exhausted Maen's body and mind, and now he just wanted to have a good rest. After dinner, the Pokemon returned to Maen's Pokeball after playing. Jengar and Darkrai still entered Maen's shadow, but Maen left two Pokemon to accompany him, a small heated Growlithe and a plush Pillow Moonbear. The temperature at night at the foot of MT Coronet was still quite low, and even with the tent and sleeping bag, Maen would feel a little chilly, but with these two Pokemon, it was different. Maen rested his head on the warm fur of Moonbear, holding Growlithe and Jirachi in his arms. The warm feeling made the tired Maen fall asleep quickly, and the surroundings instantly fell into a quiet environment. Only the rustling sound of the wind blowing through the leafage could be heard. Just when it was quiet and harmonious, a Pokemon figure slowly flew towards Maen's tent from the 967 woods. The moment it approached Maen's tent, the body of this Pokemon passed through the tent and then entered the inside of the tent. The Pokemon first looked at Maen and the sleeping faces of Pokemon quietly, and then was attracted by Maen's backpack and rushed into the backpack at once. The moment this Pokemon got into the backpack, Darkray's figure appeared from Maen's shadow, looking around vigilantly. In the moment just now, Darkrai clearly felt the fluctuation, but after vigilant observation, he found that there was no abnormality, but with suspicion, Darkrai still entered Maen's shadow and was silently vigilant. After Darkrai entered the shadow, the Pokemon Pokédex in Maen's backpack suddenly lit up, and then a barely audible sound rang quietly. Roto. The next morning, Maen slowly opened his sleepy eyes, looked at Jirachi and Growlithe, who were still sleeping in his arms, and gently stretched. Then he touched Growlithe's belly, Kfab, causing Growlithe to scratch with his hind legs. Maen looked at Growlithe and felt that he should help this little guy lose weight so that he would not evolve into an Arcanine in the future and become a slow dog. After Maen got up, Moonbear, who felt the movement, also opened his eyes, growled softly at Maen, and continued to fall asleep. Well, it seems that the weight loss army will add a new Pokemon, and the captain will be the fat little Jengar. Jirachi was also awakened by Maen's movement, slowly opened his eyes, and then snored softly. Yawn, rubbing his eyes with his little hands, flew up and then got into Maen's arms again. Maen didn't mean to stop the little guy, and then pulled his body back, ready to put the two lazy bugs who were still resting back into the Pokeball. But when Maen looked back at the backpack, he found that Darkrai and Jengar had stood up and surrounded the backpack. Maen looked at Jengar and Darkray's vigilant look and asked, "What's wrong, Jengar, nephew Yinkakai?" Jengar quickly pointed to Maen's backpack, and Darkrai told Maen what happened telepathically. "Huh, there are Pokemon in the backpack? You don't know it, let me see." Maen walked quickly to the backpack, then slowly squatted down and opened the zipper. Maen didn't worry that the Pokemon in the backpack would attack, because since Darkrai and Jengar didn't do it, it meant that the Pokemon in the backpack had no malicious intent. And Darkrai also said that the Pokemon in the backpack were not very strong, just a little strange. After Maen opened the backpack and saw the contents inside, he showed a curious expression on his face, because he didn't see any Pokemon at first. There were a lot of things, and Molter's Pokemon eggs were also safely placed inside. At this moment, Maen found that his Pokemon Pokédex seemed a little wrong, and it felt a little bigger. As if noticing Maen's sight, the Pokemon Pokédex in the backpack suddenly shook. Seeing this scene, he knew that this was the uninvited Pokemon, and Maen roughly guessed the identity of the Pokemon, and his face showed excitement. Sure enough, Maen turned over the body of the Pokédex and saw that the front of the Pokédex had changed a lot. The originally square Pokédex had two rectangular arms, and even a sharp corner appeared on the head. The most eye-catching thing is that there are two blue eyes on Maen's Pokédex. Although the two eyes are tightly closed, the two black eye slits still allow Maen to see clearly. Especially when Maen touched the Pokédex couldn't help shaking. Maen looked at the frightened look of the Pokemon and smiled helplessly, then gently took it out of the backpack. "Rotom, don't be afraid. I have no ill intentions." Maen gently stroked Rotom's sharp corners, and his tone was as gentle as possible. Hearing Maen's gentle tone, Rotom also quietly opened his blue eyes and gently said, "Rado." Hearing this familiar habit, Maen knew that this Pokemon was indeed Rotom. It was also the Pokemon that Maen had always wanted to recover. Rotom is an electric and ghost Pokemon, and the reason why Maen wanted to recover Rotom is not because of fighting, but because this kind of Pokemon is a perfect trainer assistant. Rotom can possess various electrical appliances, often playing pranks to scare others, and having fun doing so. But the strength of Rotom is that Rotom can not only possess machines, but after being breeder, some Rotom can serve as perfect trainer assistants. Having abandoned the bad habit of playing pranks, these Rotoms prefer to help their favorite trainers. And Rotom Pokédex and Rotom mobile phones came into being. The reason why Maen wanted Rotom was naturally to cultivate a Rotom that could become a Rotom Pokédex. But he didn't expect that today a Rotom would take the initiative to deliver himself to his door. Chapter 109. Chatterbox Rotom Pokédex. Rotom Pokédex is a special Pokemon that appears after Pokemon Rotom enters Pokemon Pokédex. It is precisely because of the ability of Pokemon like Rotom that Rotom Pokédex appears. Rotom Pokédex is a completely luxurious upgraded version of Pokemon Pokédex. It can not only achieve all the functions of Pokemon Pokédex, but even Rotom can help trainers complete it completely. In simple terms, it is the evolution from flip phones to smartphones, and this intelligence is artificial intelligence. Not only can it move autonomously, but can also help trainers record Pokédex throughout the process, and even has various functions such as calls, videos, map navigation, etc. With the help of Rotom Pokédex, a trainer can reduce a lot of energy consumption. However, Maen remembered that Rotom Pokédex should have been invented by Clement, and its first appearance in the animation was given to Ash by Professor Kukui after entering the Alola region. But Maen looked at the Rotom in front of him, and it was obvious that it had evolved into the Rotom Pokédex on its own, which was somewhat beyond Maen's expectations. "Rotom, how did you get into my backpack and then into the Pokédex? Do you feel anything special now?" Maen asked, holding the Rotom Pokédex in his hand. "Rotom came here last night because he heard the laughter and smelled the food. Rotom is very weak, so he has no friends, and it is difficult to find food. So I envy the relationship between Maen and Pokemon." Rotom also learned Maen's name when he entered this thing called Pokemon Pokédex. He also learned the name of Pokédex from here. Rotom feels better than ever before. Before he had no friends. Rotom could only stay alone and think about random things. After entering this Pokédex, Rotom feels that his mind is clearer than before, and a lot of new knowledge has appeared in his mind. Rotom knows that Maen came from the future. Rotom is very surprised. "Rado. So please, Maen, please keep Rotom by your side. Rotom wants friends. I want to know more about the world, Rado." After Maen asked, Rotom began to answer. But as he spoke more and more, Rotom gradually lost his fear and became like a chatterbox. Normal started to chatter and couldn't help but fly out of Maen's hand, talking excitedly around Maen. Maen also got the answer from Rotom's words. In short, Rotom heard the sound of Maen and Pokemon gathering yesterday, so he came here quietly to observe. After Maen fell asleep, Rotom quietly entered Maen's tent. He originally planned to find out if there was any leftover food, but he was attracted by the Pokédex in Maen's backpack and couldn't help but enter the Pokédex directly. As a result, after digesting the information in the Pokédex all night, Rotom couldn't help but make a sound when he woke up in the morning and was arrested on the spot by the vigilant Darkrai, who joined Gengar to capture Rotom. Rotom's strength was not very good to begin with, but after entering the Pokédex, he was caught by Darkrai and Gengar on the spot, and could only hide in the backpack in fear until Maen woke up. "Okay, Rotom, stop talking. I promise you, stop nagging." Maen couldn't stand Rotom's chattering and quickly agreed. Maen was planning to make a Rotom Pokédex anyway, so now that Rotom was at his doorstep, he naturally wouldn't refuse. When Rotom heard that Maen was willing to take it in, the two blue eyes on the Pokédex screen couldn't help but start crying, and then happily circled Maen to celebrate, celebrating that he finally had a friend. However, after crying for a while, before Maen opened his mouth to comfort him, Rotom stopped crying and said with a serious expression on his face, "As Maen's Rotom Pokédex, it should be professional. Now Rotom has to work on the contest condition Rado. But now it is in ancient times, so Rotom Pokédex has no signal, and many functions cannot be displayed, but some basic functions can still be used. Maen's goal is to go to the Inuit battlefield at the foot of MT Cornet, right? Rotom is very familiar with the terrain here, and Maen Pokédex also has the future Shitsue. It should be called Sinnoh's map. Rotom Pokédex is comparing and analyzing. Okay, the map has been drawn for Maen. The current route is the closest and most convenient route to the Inuit battlefield. Maen can see the screen Rado. As the chatterbox Rotom Pokédex talked to himself, Maen saw the map of MT Cornet foothills displayed on the Rotom Pokédex. And Maen's current location was specially marked with a red dot, and a black line was connected to the red dot, and the endpoint was marked with the words Inuit Battlefield. Looking at the clear map, Maen couldn't help but sigh that the function of Rotom Pokédex was much more convenient than Maen's own judgment. Rotom Pokédex, it's amazing it analyzed the route so quickly. Maen couldn't help but praise. Of course, Rado. I am Maen's Rotom Pokédex. I must help Maen become the strongest and best trainer. This route was specially selected by me according to the strength of the Pokémon encountered along the way and the strength of Maen's Pokémon, among which... Stop! Rotom, I know you're very powerful. Take a break first. Maen saw that the chatterbox was about to start talking non-stop and hurriedly stopped Rotom. Maen stopped Rotom and started to move along the route planned by Rotom. As expected, there were no obstacles along the way. Soon they arrived at Inuit Battlefield. Before arriving at Inuit Battlefield, Maen also saw the field manager Muchun. Muchun was surprised to see Maen coming. You know, other field managers specially sent him to the challenge venue to facilitate Maen's challenge. And Muchun didn't like Maen, so he didn't help Maen lead the way, just to make it difficult for Maen and let Maen waste time on the road. After all, the terrain at the foot of MT Cornet is complicated. Without someone to lead, it would take a lot of time for Maen to find Inuit Battlefield by himself. As a result, Muchun didn't expect Maen to find Inuit Battlefield so quickly, so he showed a surprised expression on his face. Chapter 1: 10 Biological Weapons. Muchun was surprised to see Maen coming. Then his face turned ugly again, and he said in a stiff tone, "Future man, you are not welcome here. Leave quickly. It doesn't matter if you are not welcome. I just want to conduct the king's trial." Maen also said without giving Muchun a good look, "The king does not need you, an outsider, to appease him, and the king does not need to be appeased. I can't be your treasure. It's okay. I'll just beat up the king inside." "Damn rude guy, I won't let you in." Muchun's face showed an angry expression when he heard Maen's words, and then released his tank weasel to block Maen in front of him. Maen didn't like Muchun's attitude in the first place, and seeing that 410 Muchun was going to take action, he naturally wouldn't be polite and directly called out Gengar. As the field manager, Muchun's Skuntank's combat power was barely quasi-elite, and his combat experience was not very good. A few minutes later, Muchun rolled his eyes and lay on the ground, and his Skuntank also lost the ability to fight and fell to the ground. Maen held onto the tree and made a retching sound, while Gengar tied up Muchun and Skuntank with disgust and put them in a safe place. Maen never dreamed that Muchun, who looked quite clean, would fight so dirty. In the end, seeing that he could not beat Maen, he actually let Skuntank start a biochemical attack and sprayed venom directly towards Maen in all directions. You should know that the venom of Skuntank is stored in the stomach, and the longer it is stored, the worse it smells. Maen didn't know how long the venom of Muchun's Skuntank had been stored, but Maen certainly didn't want to get any drops of it on his body. However, even though Maen dodged quickly, the venom was still sprayed on the ground, and the stench of the venom made Maen hold onto the tree and retched. Even Jirachi in his arms flew far away at this time, covering his nose and not daring to get close at all. Maen wanted to wait for the stench to dissipate before entering the battlefield, but it turned out that the old cellar was indeed worthy of its age, and the smell lingered for a long time. In the end, Maen had no choice but to let Gengar carry him into the battlefield from above. Maen tied Muchuin and Skuntank to a tree, and then let Muchuin feel the smell himself. Maen couldn't help but exhale after entering the battlefield, and finally recovered from the stench just now. However, when Maen just landed, he heard an explosion in the battlefield, and then some Pokemon living here all ran out and passed by Maen in panic. Wait! Maen saw these Pokemon running towards the direction behind him and hurriedly shouted to stop them. But these panicked Pokemon completely ignored him and still ran to the back. As a result, they were attacked by biological weapons before they ran far, and they ran back collectively, covering their noses and retching, and then ran to Maen's side and gasped. Maen also smiled evilly at these panting Pokemon. It's not his fault. These Pokemon didn't listen to him. However, Maen had guessed the reason for the explosion just now. It should be the explosion of Electrode inside. Pokemon like Electrode is a natural bomb, just like its name. Because it is easy to absorb electricity, Electrode often stores a large amount of electricity without limit, especially near some power plants. When the store electricity is about to overflow, Electrode's body will explode after a little stimulation. At the same time, the more electricity, the faster they roll out. It would be fine if it was just like this. Just avoid Electrode. But the character of Pokemon like Electrode is very bad. For them who are bored, explosion is the greatest fun, so it is not uncommon for Electrode to hurt people in the Pokemon world. Researchers in the Pokemon world have conducted a special survey on the compatibility of Pokemon and trainers. Among them, Eevee ranks first in compatibility due to its appearance and multiple evolution forms, because few people dislike Pokemon that are cute, have many evolution options, and are not bad in strength. 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 0, 5, 2, 5, Filu, 1, 2, 2, 0, 8, 1, 2, 4, 1. And in this compatibility, Electrode ranks last all year round. It is because of the trouble of Electrode's easy self-destruction that for some weak trainers, Electrode is a real bomb. Every year, trainers are injured by their own Electrode, and those powerful trainers who want to train Electrode also need to be cautious and need to regularly help Electrode release the electricity in their bodies to maintain a safe contest condition. Now, the fleeing Pokemon in front of Maen are probably because the Electrode in the forest exploded again and they fled in fear. After all, an explosive Pokemon like Electrode, coupled with a violent state, is already a walking disaster. So Maen doesn't like Muchuin, not only because he prevents Maen from challenging, but also because of his indulgence of Electrode. Although it is his duty to take care of the king of the battlefield, he, as the field manager, also needs to be responsible for the consequences of Electrode. A dangereux Pokémon. Reality is different from the game. If Electrode is too close to some Pokemon when it explodes, it will really kill the Pokemon on the spot. As Maen walked, he could see some 2.4 burnt trees and deep pits after the explosion. During this period, Maen also rescued some Pokemon that were injured by the explosion, bandaged their wounds, and pointed out the direction of escape. Just as Maen was bandaging the wound of an injured Cherim, an Electrode suddenly rushed out of the forest and released a colored flash on his body and hit Maen. Gengar and Darkrai immediately blocked in front of Maen, ready to repel the flying Electrode. But before the two Pokemon could make a move, a different colored Electrode suddenly jumped out from the woods next to Maen and collided with the Electrode in the air. The huge impact force directly knocked the Electrode that attacked Maen away and bounced back into the woods. Chapter 111. Different color Electrode. The color of Electrode in Shitsue region is not only different from other regions, but also the same is true for Pokemon of different colors. The lower body of Electrode of different colors is pure black. Maen looked at the Electrode of different colors in front of him, and a curious look appeared on his face, because Maen could clearly see that the power of this Electrode was well controlled, and there was no arc of electricity flowing. Moreover, from the performance of repelling the Electrode that was about to attack, this Electrode of different colors was obviously not a Pokemon that liked to attack others, but helped Maen. Although Maen was protected by Gengar and Darkrai, this Electrode of different colors did not know, but took the initiative to help Maen, which shows that it was not as bad-tempered as other Electrodes. Maen also saw several obvious scars on the cone-like body of this electrode of different colors.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.